Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku got a quirk from a black-eyed god? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The first time he met the black-eyed man, it had nothing to do with his abilities or lack thereof. It had nothing to do with the boy's emotions or fears. It was mere coincidence he came during a moment when his life was in danger. The black-eyed man only came to him for one reason. Izuku Midoriya, aren't you quite the interesting puzzle piece of history? I have an offer for you. You've always wanted powers since that day? I can give them to you. I am the outsider and this is my mark. Midoriya had concluded one thing as fact about this day as he struggled against the green slime of a villain taking over his body. It was probably the second worst day of his life. Oh sure, he was dying, but he was worthless, quirkless nerd, who would care if he went missing. Still, it hurt bad being choked out like this. The villain was saying something, but Izuku was too focused on not dying to really take in his words. Can't breath. My body getting weak? The slime suddenly increased in its quantity and Midoriya thought for sure he was about to choke to death. Somebody, help. The world went black. It's truly amazing what just the tiny minute differences of an area in a moment of time can do to a whole timeline. Midoriya blinked in shock. His throat was no longer clogged and he could move freely. He still felt tired from the sudden altercation and fell backwards onto the ground. He shivered as he felt what could only be described as an endless cold. Then his brain finally registered the voice he just heard. What the W, who's there? He shouted out, confused. Am I dead? A valid question, I suppose, and in fact one that does not have a set-in-stone answer. Whether you live or die now, that's your choice. The voice was haunting yet alluring. It was masculine but young and yet so old at the same time. Midoriya blinked as he tried to decipher what the heck his statement meant. However, when his eyes opened again, the teen's jaw dropped. He could feel the stone of the tunnel he had been in previously beneath his feet, but it felt different, and sure enough it was. The roof above was no longer there. It almost looked as if it had exploded outwards but was frozen in time as its chunks were still visible in the air. What truly grabbed his attention, though, and confirmed for sure this was not the same place he had been before. What should have been the bright blue sky and bustling commuters of Mizudafu instead was an empty swirling void of nothing. Some floating gray rocks were visible in the distance as the only features in this empty place. A swirl of black shards and shadows appeared in front of him where the slime villain would once be. Immediately the boy was on guard, not that he would be any match for most normal people, let alone a villain with what appeared to be a teleportation quirk. From the shards emerged tall dark-haired man with a rough face. He wore an outfit not too different from the one Midoriya himself was in, a standard male uniform for Japanese middle schools. The only differences being the materials they were made of and the fact that the size of the collar on the dark man was quite a bit higher. None of that truly caught the smaller quirkless boy's attention like the most defining feature of the mysterious man did. His eyes. An endless inky darkness from which it seemed one could see reflected all that ever had been and all that ever could be. The forest-haired teen was in the habit of committing all he could about those he met to memory to analyze, but even had he not developed that habit, he doubted he could forget the entity before him. Izuku Midoriya. It was the voice from before that left the man's mouth. Man? Maybe once I was, but not anymore. Wait, you can hear my thoughts? The boy exclaimed in surprise and his eyes widened. Losing himself to his own wonder, he ran to the man and started properly taking in the form, causing said man to actually step back a bit. Is that your quirk? But I would have thought it had to do with the way you teleported just now? Is that something else? I've never seen any kind of quirk with such an odd combination of attributes and… The boy never finished his rant as a pair of black, almost smoke-like tendrils clamped over his mouth. It wasn't like the violent way the slime villain had attacked him, though. In a way, this was oddly pleasant, calming. Contrary to the belief of some long-forgotten men, I am not a malevolent force. I have no desire to harm you. Of course, I would not replicate that oversized slime's methods. Admittedly, I should have foreseen your incessant ramblings being a sticking point if I allowed you speech. However, as none in this world remember me, I suppose I can share with you more knowledge than I normally would to those who capture my interest. I am not your average person, as you can already tell. I walk between the fissures of reality where the laws of physics are devised by madmen. I've seen worlds freeze and creations burn. I was here long before existence began and will be long after it runs out. And yet, I will never have existed either. Confusion. That was undoubtedly Midoriya's most prominent feeling right now. Mortal minds. Annoyingly frail and incapable of higher understanding. How I long for that ignorance. You asked what my quirk is? Is that what you call the varied abilities this era of humans possess? The smaller boy nodded, as it was all he was capable of doing. Who was this guy and how did he not know what quirks were? Quirks, what a curious decision. Even without my humanity fully intact, I admit I do enjoy how simply human such a name for these abilities are. Tell me, Izuku, are you in any way religious? Any belief in some god? The tendrils will let go now. Please, refrain from wasting time. As the man, no, entity before him stared him down waiting for his answer, Midoriya mulled it over in his mind. Normally he would say he had no belief in a god or a lack of one, but with the way this conversation was panning out, with how the taller person before him spoke and acted, not to mention the undeniable powers he had. Midoriya was many things, unobservant was rarely one of them. He could see where this was going. He looked up to the taller of the two. He seemed to have a habit of pacing around and occasionally teleporting back beside the green-haired boy. You're saying, you're a god? Thankfully you are quick on the uptake. I am the outsider and this place is my home, the void. Of course, you're probably wondering why I have no worshippers if I am a god. I am not someone who likes to be involved normally. I do not delude myself to think that I am entirely unbiased as my humanity still remains, but I do have duties to fulfill. Letting you all worship others lets me stay away until my intervention is necessary, or in some cases, much like this, a soul calls out to me in a way I simply can't ignore. Midoriya stared out into the distance as he experienced a violent and sudden paradigm shift. There was a god? He was uninvolved regularly? He knew he probably shouldn't believe it so easily, but it wasn't like he hadn't already seen a fair bit of evidence already. One burning question entered Izuku's mind. And that question is? Now the smaller boy had had a chance to truly calm down. He noticed the constant, almost bored, sardonic tone of voice the apparent god used. And make it too. Could you please stop listening to my thoughts? It's... The boy couldn't find the words, but the outsider seemed to understand what was unsaid. Done. So, if you're uninvolved, why come to me? What about me could be necessary? The boy asked, confused. His confusion only grew when an actual scowl crossed the god's face. There is no necessity to my contacting you, he told the quirkless boy. Then why? Sometimes my lack of involvement leaves me frustrated. I do not meddle much because it's not my place to do so. A strict set of rules I imposed on myself long ago. You believe you would only be contacted by necessity. I assume that is to do with those classmates I saw earlier? Midoriya was sure he misheard the slight change in tone the outsider. It sounded oddly protective. But that was ludicrous, surely? Sure, earlier that day, he had been quite badly treated by his classmates, he supposed. He just wanted to be a hero. Was it so wrong that he wanted to try for the hero school of his dreams, even if he wasn't as strong as his classmates? Apparently it was, according to their mocking laughs. A blonde-haired teen with a nasty scowl crossed his mind. Defenseless Izuku. This school already sucks. You really want to embarrass it more by failing so hard. If you want a quirk, there might actually be a way. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building and pray you get one in your next life. Still he had asked a question. Well, I'm just a powerless nerd. They've made sure I know that. Regardless, I want to be a hero, but even I know how pathetic I dash. Stop. I must admit that you feel this way frustrates me. I am not one normally to care about mortal affairs, as I'm sure is quite clear, but I have my past same as anyone, and bullies are something I simply can't stand. That's all they are, Midoriya. Their words are not worth heeding, especially that blonde excuse for a human. There is no such thing as being worthless. If you were worthless, you would not exist. Midoriya almost doubled over in shock from the statement. He had never been old otherwise about being worthless before. His mother certainly hadn't encouraged those thoughts, but sometimes he felt like she believed them deep down. So for not just anyone, but an actual god to tell him otherwise, he could feel the tears welling up. He always was a crybaby. This was a dream, right? Some weird dream. He'd passed out in the villain's grasp and his mind was just sending him happy thoughts. I would appreciate it if you didn't soak the floor of my home. It didn't take much for the god to go back to his uninterested tone apparently. I've wasted far more time on this encounter than I normally do. Then again, that's exactly why I'm here. You are an anomaly, Izuku Midoriya. Your future is undecided. You can be anything depending on your choices. Despite this world having so many little quirks to it, you were born without any powers at all, correct? Yes, sir. It was not my happiest day, Midoriya said, looking out into the distance of the gray landscape. Such an odd place, he mused. No, I'm quite aware of your despair over that diagnosis. In fact, I'd imagine that if you had the ability to change that, you'd like to take it. How fortunate then that I am a god who could grant you said powers then. Midoriya's head whipped around to the taller entity so fast that it almost made him worry he had snapped his neck for a moment. The god had an amused grin on his face. It didn't really suit him. Midoriya might have nightmares for weeks about that face, but it was nice in a way. You don't mean... Oh, I do. There's a catch, but not as major as you might think. Your hand will be marked by a symbol of a dead language, my name. It's been so long since I could read it, and for all my power, I am still restricted to be unable to read it. It can be irritable in unpredictable ways. It might hurt or itch. It varies. A slight discomfort and marking is the price for an indeterminate amount of powers. I simply can't tell you what they may be. They vary from person to person. Though I suspect you will inherit ones from those already marked and perhaps more than any before. Think carefully about this. You do have a choice. Once it's made, you cannot go back. The outsider then remembered to add on. Oh, and it's worth noting, when I release you from the void, you will be back in that slimy monstrosity's grasp. Without the mark, perhaps you can still cling to life just long enough for help to arrive. The mark can guarantee that survival, as I will allow it to boost your natural vitality, respiration, standard enhancements. Normal, I would leave it to you to obtain these powers, but considering the circumstance, I'm willing to make an exception. The boy spent a fair amount of time considering it. For his part, the outsider didn't rush him, respecting the difficulty of the choice, even if the answer would seem obvious first glance. Are they the only ones for certain? The only catches for the powers? Well, at least the only ones that are dictated by the mark. There may be others, but that all depends on how you use it. Then I accept, Midoriya said with what for him was an unnatural amount of conviction in his voice. I'll take your mark, Mr. Outsider. The god laughed. Somehow it was both creepy and alluring at the same time. Certainly another thing about this place he wouldn't be forgetting soon. Millennia since I began this life, and never once in all that time. Mr. Outsider, thanks for the laugh. It's a rarity for me. Now dash. In an instance, he was right in front of Midoriya, black eyes meet green. This is my mark. The young boy felt himself cringe as his left hand suddenly flared with pain. He lifted it to see the mark forming on his backhand, burning itself from the inside into existence. He hissed from the pain, but it finished in an instant. It was an odd symbol to be sure, but in a way it brought comfort to the boy when he looked at it. It rotated around itself and had many spikes on it as well as a few circles. It certainly looked like some ancient symbol. It almost looked alien. Now, it's time for you to return to the real world. It will be a while before your powers manifest. That is different from those before you, but I need some time to prepare. This world is different. It operates on different rules as a result. Midoriya started to feel an odd pressure in his head. What was happening? I do apologize for this next part, but it will be more interesting and perhaps also more in your interest if you do not remember this encounter for a while. You'll remember when the time is right. I will let you remember this excuse, at least for those who pry into the mark. Simply a tattoo artist with a quirk designed for it managed to accidentally mar you instead. I'll let you figure out the specifics of that excuse if you use it. Finally, Izuku passed out once again. Izuku stared out across the expanse of the beach he had finally cleared earlier that week, waiting for All Might. It had been 10 months since he had met the #1 hero, and thinking about the fact that his childhood idol was now his mentor never failed to make the boy feel a little giddy. It subsided quickly though when he looked down and saw out the corner of the vision the mysterious mark. He lifted his left arm and looked at the back of his hand. Upon it was an odd rune-like marking, akin to that of a tattoo. He had no idea where it had come from, a fact that unnerved him and caused the boy to frown. Sometimes, on rare occasions, his hand was filled with a dull ache. Was it someone's quirk at play? Or something else? Ever since it had appeared, the boy couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched, but oddly, it seemed reassuring in a way. The boy's thoughts turned back to the fateful day he had met All Might and been chosen as the hero's successor. So many events and emotions occurred that day. All Might crushing his dreams of ever becoming a hero, and then later not only rekindling them but adding more fuel to the fire than ever before. And of course, there was the whole slime villain incident. That one gave Izuku pause. He had been so sure of his own demise when the monster attacked him, but Detroit Smash. The villain had been defeated, the wind pressure of the blonde's punch alone blowing the monster apart. He had latched onto the pro before he had a chance to leave. The massive hulking blonde had been insistent he didn't have time, despite the many questions the green-haired boy wanted to ask. Izuku had assumed he meant time to interact with a fan. He was wrong. Can I become a hero? I'm a normal kid without any powers. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always thought saving someone with a smile on your face was the coolest thing anyone could do. The rest of the students make fun of me, call me names. I may be quirkless, but could I ever hope to be someone like you? This job isn't easy. It isn't bad to dream, young man. Just make sure they're realistic, attainable. A hero needs to be able to rush into action, to take on threats that can be terrifying in a heartbeat. Without a power, you can't do that. Now I need to get this guy back to the station. Maybe you could become an officer. They get a lot of flack because heroes catch most of the villains, but it's a fine profession for someone in your position. The blonde walked away with that. His thoughts consumed him. He really was as worthless, as pathetic as everyone said? That's not what All Might said, of course, but what might as well have been. An explosion went off in the distance, pulling him out of his thoughts. He would normally rush to see what heroes would show up, he would have even now. But All Might himself had told him to give up. What was the point? As it would turn out, he'd end up there anyways. He felt sick as he watched. This was his fault. The slime villain had someone else, and it was only cause he was stupid enough to latch onto All Might and cause him to lose the slime villain. He could see whoever it was struggling. Finally their face came down, and for the briefest moments it felt as though all of time stopped. Those scared, piercing red eyes. That sound of anguish. The blonde hair sticking out the top. Izuku went wide-eyed. The villain had Kaken? In one moment, he had gone from being in the crowd to all of a sudden being barreling down the street. It scared him how fast he was moving. It felt almost unnatural. Was this just adrenaline? The slime villain made to attack him, but the boy figured out a plan quick, taking of his bag and hurling it at the villain. Notebooks and pencils fell out, blinding his attacker when they hit his eye. Finally, in what felt like no time at all, he was scooping away at the villain. He knew it was a futile effort as he couldn't do anything before, but now, it seemed his hands were almost repelling the slime. He almost had a hold of Bakugu. Everything he'd ever been told was pouring through his head until the boy had barely registered the pro hero, Death Arm's shout as the slimy tendril came down to him. For the second time he was sure he was about to die to the slime villain. It never came though. I really am pathetic. I told you what makes a hero, and yet I wasn't living up to my own ideals. Detroit Smash. The punch was even more powerful than the first time, strong enough to create a minor tornado from the wind pressure. Young Midoriya. A booming voice brought him out of his reminiscing and caused him to fall over. Oh, sorry about that. Just you were really spacing out there. All Might. Sorry. I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long. The boy frantically rushed to apologize. The blonde cut him off with a booming laugh. He was dressed in the same outfit he had been when he'd faced the sludge villain. White shirt and green jeans. No need to worry, young man. I was just as jittery when I first did the exam. Nerves can get the best of us. The blonde assured him. But look around, you're all prepared. You finished the training way before I had anticipated. You've still been doing all the important exercises like I asked, right? The freckled teen nodded. Yes, sir. You told me how important it was, and don't worry, my mom's helped keep me from overworking myself like did at first. I know it's probably silly to say this before I even have one for all, but I feel like I could take on the world already in some ways. Glad to hear it. You did good, really good. You still have quite a ways to go, but you should now be a suitable vessel, enough to house the power inside your body. Now it's time for the crowning moment. Izuku looked away, silent before turning back and hearing All Might quietly asking what was on his mind. A sad smile graced his lips, tears starting to form. What did I do to be so lucky? I feel like I'm cheating. The blonde tilted his head. Were it not for the shadows covering them, you could have seen the confusion in his eyes. You did all this for me, I don't? He looked around the beach. 10 months ago, it had been more like a trash heap than a beach. People used the current of the waves for getting away with littering. It all ended up on the beach. And at All Might's instructions, he had cleared the whole beach for the last 10 months. All in preparation for one thing. Something Izuku never thought would come at one point. It was your hard work that did this, not mine, young Midoriya. The blonde assured him as he plucked a strand of hair from his head. There's a difference between being lucky and deserving. One's an accident, the other a reward. Never get the two confused. The teen looked up to see the blonde almost radiating light as if he replaced the sun itself. The loose strand of hair held tight in his grasp, fluttering in the wind. Take that to heart, young man. This gift, you earned it with your own valiant efforts. Izuku felt an immense joy inside. It was finally time. He held out his hands and prepared for whatever came next. Eat this. Okay, that he hadn't prepared for. To inherit my power you gotta swallow some of my DNA, that's how it works? The blonde nervously explained. This isn't exactly what I had in mind. The freckled teen exclaimed, confused. He kicked himself mentally for how ungrateful that must have sounded after all the work his mentor put in for him. Come on, there's no time. Now hurry up or you'll be late for the exam. Now eat. Izuku stared at the entrance to the school he so badly wished to attend. He had swallowed the hair, which had been anything but a pleasant experience. He didn't really feel any different than he did before, but he trusted All Might. He had asked why the blonde had waited until today to give him the power if he was prepared as soon as he cleared the beach. The answer hadn't been the most comforting. Even if you're a more prepared vessel now, one for all will be stronger going to you than when I received it. It doesn't hurt to be prepared, so I thought it would be best to keep you training and building your body up as long as possible before giving it you. The boy covered his mouth with his marked hand. I swallowed the hair, but I don't feel any different. Stupid Deku? He heard a familiar growl from behind him. He turned around to see his former childhood friend stalking towards him with his usual scowl. Oh, Kakendash, get out of my way before I set you on fire. Izuku definitely didn't need to be told twice. He jumped of the blonde's way immediately. Oh hey, good morning, let's both just do our best out there, okay? Good luck. Izuku sputtered out as quickly as possible while flailing like a lunatic. Kaken simply ignored him and continued walking. Just as he thought he'd managed to avoid an altercation with the hot-heated teen, said teen stopped in his tracks. Oh, and keep that stupid fucking mark hidden. That bullshit tale you came up with about it will get me in just as much trouble if anyone sees it. With that, the blonde took his leave. The freckled teen let out a sigh of relief and watched the explosion Quirk wielder walk away as some other students talked about him. Ever since that day, Kaken's been taking less of a threat than usual. Guess I was just scared out of habit. He shook his head and stood proud. But I'm not defenseless anymore. I have to remember all the hard work I did. He could feel his legs shaking like mad. Nerves really did get the best of people, like All Might said. All Might? Thanks to All Might, I'm actually going to be a hero. His feet collided and he felt the wind brush past his face as he tripped and fell. Or I'll just die. But he didn't. Before he could collide with the ground, he stopped. He couldn't feel his feet on the ground though. Hey, are you okay? That was unmistakably a girl's voice, and hand on his back? Without think, he immediately started flailing in midair before realizing what he was doing and stopping. He looked to his left to see a cute brown-haired girl. She set him back onto his feet and pressed her fingers together, making a sort of pyramid shape. I stopped you with my quirk. Sorry I didn't ask first, but I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you. Izuku just stared. Isn't this all way nerve-wracking? Thought it was all he could get out. He could already hear everyone laughing at him if they learned about this. Well, guess I'll see you inside. Bye. The brunette told him with a bright smile. Izuku just stood there for a couple minutes, mentally rebooting. Finally, when his brain came back to him, he shouted aloud, "Holy WH, I talked to a girl?" That plus the maniacal laughter scaring everyone around him. Once he calmed down and realized what he was doing, he vowed to smash himself over the head with a lamp when he got home. Maybe he'd be able to forget it then. As he sat in the exam hall, trying his best not to freak out about Kaken being right beside him, he had embarrassed himself again with his muttering. He had really gotten on one tall blue-haired boy's nerves apparently, and had gotten chewed out in front of everyone. He was focusing on the test as best as possible. It was not all that hard by Izuku's standards, but he couldn't help his mind still drifting as he worked. Izuku wandered down the street, a sad gaze in his eyes. He had been seriously chewed out for trying to save Kaken. He still wasn't even entirely sure why he had moved. It was like his body had gone on autopilot. He really wanted to apologize to All Might, considering the whole mess was his fault in the first place, but had been unable to because of the amount of reporters. He'd have to try and send the man a message when he got home on the hero's website. He doubted it would go through. He heard a familiar voice call out behind him. Turning around, Izuku saw the angry blonde running down the street to him. Finally he caught up, and he seemed as though he was pretty out of breath, yet he glared straight forward. Kaken? He asked, confused. Kaken's hands tightened into fists and his hair covered his eyes, creating an ominous shadow on his face as he growled out what he had come to say. Listen, I'd never ask for a weakling like you to help me. Don't think you can look down on me. Huh. Got that? I was fine by myself. You're just a quirkless failure who won't even cut it as a rent-a-cop. You didn't help me. You did nothing. Don't forget the blonde was cut out of his angry rant as he looked down at the boy's hand. What the hell? Deku, the fuck is that? Huh. That question definitely confused him. He had something on his hand? He looked down and screamed when he saw the mark. Aghai, what is that? You don't know? What the fuck, Deku? The blonde asked, surprise taking place instead of his usual anger for now, although Izuku could probably only tell his next shout was more confusion than anger solely cause he'd known him so long. You didn't fucking have that earlier. After a moment where Izuku just started blankly himself at the mark, Bakugo composed himself, well as best he could considering who he was, and just glared. Go to a fucking doctor or something, Deku. Not my fucking problem. And with that the blonde stomped away, leaving Deku to freak out alone about the mark. What the heck was it? Where had it come from? How had he not noticed? As he studied it, he found it calmed him in a weird way. He'd definitely have to go to the doctor or something with it though. He sighed, just one more thing on this nightmare of a day. He's not wrong about me doing nothing. It's not like I actually did anything to help today. The boy thought as he continued to walk, warily eyeing his hand. At least I tried. Guess now I should get back to giving up on my dreams and figuring this thing out. I am here. Time's up, listeners. Time to get ready for that practical. Present Mick's voice cut through his memories like a knife to butter. UA High School's entire teaching staff were all pro heroes, and the blonde man with massive spiky hair at the front of the room was no exception. A pro hero, teacher and radio host with a voice-amplifying quirk, Present Mike was a massively popular hero. Izuku looked down at his paper and was relieved to see that despite his trance state he'd still managed to finish the test with what to him seemed to be very satisfactory answers. He signed his name at the top and brought it to the front like everyone else before heading off to the buses to start the practical exam. It wouldn't take long for them to arrive. Until then, though, he was grateful as he slipped back into his memories once more. It was quickly becoming a way to keep himself from freaking out too much about the upcoming test. After all, he had no idea how to fight giant robots or if his powers would kick in time for him to even be able to fight the robots. You always did have to be grandiose, it seemed. Still, it wasn't the #1 hero school in Japan for no reason. But seriously, how the hell did a school budget for an entire city with no residents yet functioning plumbing and utilities? There would be 4 types of robots the examinees would be facing, the first worth 1 point, the second worth 2, the third worth 3, and a fourth one that was more an obstacle to avoid apparently worth no points. All Might, why you here? How did you get rid of those reporters? The boy asked, surprised. The blonde let out a booming laugh. I stand for justice. Not sound bites, because I am all Emiyak. The muscular blonde disappeared in cloud of smoke, and out emerged his skinny form. The form that had been Izuku's third, no fourth, fifth, one of the many shocks of his day. The skinny man coughed before wiping away the blood, making Izuku yelp. Young man, I wanted to thank you and also discuss your question from earlier. Huh. If you hadn't told me about your life, if you hadn't run into that fight, I would have been a worthless bystander watching from the crowd. So thanks. Oh no. It was my fault he was there to begin with. I got in the way of your hard work, I wasted your energy, and not to mention your time, the boy said sadly. He knew if he just had learned his place like Kaken said, none of this would have happened. I'm not done. You told me you didn't have a power, so when I saw this timid quirkless boy try to save a life, it inspired me to act too. There are stories about every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own. Izuku felt the tears start to form in his eyes as his gaze hit the ground. And today, that's what happened to you. Young man, you too can become a hero. I deem you worthy of my power, my quirk is yours to inherit. The bus had finally arrived. He was here. It wouldn't be long until the exam started. In the meantime, everyone was stretching and doing exercises to prepare themselves. To his surprise, he actually spotted the brown-haired girl from earlier. Oh hey, it's her. I should probably thank her for earlier dash. Before the boy could get too close, though, a strong hand clamped down on his shoulder. He turned, and to his not-so-pleasant surprise, it was the blue-haired boy from earlier. She seems to be trying to prepare for the trials ahead. What are you going to do? Distract her and ruin her chances to succeed? He accused the freckled teen, leaving to have to quickly defend himself. He could hear the other students talking about him, none sounding positive. Why do I feel like everyone's already written me off? By the time he managed to get the blue-haired teen off his case, the test started and Izuku was left behind in seconds, leaving him to scramble in, trying to recall what All Might said about how to use one for all and trying not to panic about how long it was taking to find any robot before they were destroyed. You've got to prepare yourself before using this quirk, so I want you to clench your butt cheeks and yell this from the depths of your heart. English. Suddenly one of the faux villains came crashing through the wall and bearing down on him. A one-pointer. Target acquired. The villains rushed at him, making him stop dead. Whoa, gotta dodge him. He knew what he needed to do. Unfortunately, it seemed as if his body refused to get the message as he was frozen in place. Why won't my feet move? Come on. Move. Move. Holy crap, I'm gonna die dash. The villain bearing down on him was destroyed in an instant as a bright blue laser shot through the robot. Got him, a fancy voice called out. Izuku looked to see one of the people from earlier, a blonde boy with specialized gear, give him a wink. Merci beaucoup, we make a great team with you as my decoy. Although, I doubt I'll be seeing too much of each other in the future. Adieu. What did he mean by that? He wondered. And what was with that phony accent? 6 minutes and 2 seconds left. That brought the boy out of his stupor. He rushed as fast as he could, on the lookout for any more villains, but they all seemed to be destroyed now. Not good, not good, not good. As he looked around, he saw the brown-haired girl once again, levitating some robots into the air. Her again. And release, she exclaimed while touching her fingers together like before. The robots all fell from the air and exploded. She took a second to catch her breath. Alright, that should put me at least at 28 points. 28? Izuku questioned as he gaped while running. How had she gotten so many already? Suddenly an explosion came from the boy's side and he looked to see the blue-haired boy destroying another robot with a kick. That puts me at 45. How'd he get so many? All around people started listing their scores, all amazingly high. All much better than Izuku's 0. At this rate, there won't be any enemies left, I'm gonna fail. Izuku felt ready to faint, even if the exam wasn't over yet. He had yet to destroy any villains and at this rate he wouldn't score even one measly point. A part of him wished he'd even just run into a 0-pointer so he could prove he could at least actually do something even if didn't get any points for it. Of course, fate was a fickle mistress and only heeded his wishes when he could suffer for it usually. So of course, this time it listened. A loud rumbling broke out across the field, drawing the attention of all the participants. Windows shattered, building cracked and dust was kicked up everywhere. Izuku would have used a select few words he'd learned from Kaken if his mouth wasn't sealed shut from fear. A robot as tall as skyscraper was peering out at him and the rest, its massive treads coming towards them with no regards for their survival. Izuku wanted to kick Present Mike despite the hero being a favorite of his. This was the 0-pointer. Isn't this a little extreme? The gigantic villain punched the ground, kicking up dirt and debris everywhere, causing Izuku to fall back. He stared wide-eyed in fear at the robot as the other ran past him without a second thought. He turned and tried to crawl away as fast as possible. This is a disaster. I gotta run away and find some smaller villains. Crap. I'm still at 0 points. Less than 2 minutes remaining. Present Mic's voice boomed out across the mock city. What, 2 minutes? No. Images of all the work he and All Might did at the beach clouded his mind. Everything All Might did for me, all that training, it'll be wasted. Ow. Izuku froze, turning around as time seemed to slow like it did when he had tried to save Kaken. He saw the brown-haired girl stuck on the floor. Her leg was trapped under some rubble, she was unable to move and the 0-pointer was bearing down on her fast. It would crush her soon. Her voice from before rang clear through the boy's mind. I'm sorry I didn't ask first, but I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you. Without another thought the boy could feel himself back on his feet and running. This time though he was running right towards the danger, not that that was how his mind currently thought of it. All he could see was that he was running to help someone in need. His legs braced, he felt an energy coursing through him. Two in fact. One was familiar but the other was not. He jumped up, summoning the power of one for all and something else. His legs lifted up as the boy jumped. Once again all the participants were staring, but this time not at the 0-pointer but at the boy hurtling through the air. He had kicked up just as much dirt as the 0-pointer did when it hit the ground. The boy was barely registering anything properly at this point. Instincts kicking in. He ignored the pains his legs suddenly had that seemed to be phasing in and out. One moment the villain had filled his entire vision. The next all he saw was blue sky. He looked down. He'd overshot. He'd misjudged how much power he had and had sailed right above the villain which was still on its way to crushing the girl. What did he do now? To his surprise he got an answer. Look at your marked hand. The boy recognized the voice barely but had no idea whose it was. What was that? He did as it said though and was surprised to see the mark glowing a brilliant blue. His hand seemed to act all of its own accord as he turned back to face the robot. Some small, semi-opaque black and purple tendrils shot out his hand and wrapped around the robot's head, pulling the boy back. He was confused but didn't have time for questions. He had to save that girl. Now he had a slight bit more idea of his power. He aimed for the robot's head and kicked towards the robot, using the wind pressure generated by his legs and flying to the robot. He turned around mid-air, remembering the way he'd seen the blue-haired boy destroy one of the smaller villains and smashed right through the robot's head, coming out the other side. Now that he was on the trajectory to the ground, he had a path he could follow. The panels of the robot's head were falling through the air thanks to the way he had smashed through. He probably had only a few more seconds to act, The way he'd smashed through had also accelerated the rate at which the robot was going to crush Girl. He sent the power coursing through him one last time and kicked himself towards the falling panels, trying to jump between them. They gave him the vantage he needed as he rocketed towards the robot's chest. He pulled his left arm back, ready to punch the robot full force as All Might's voice came through in his head. He felt it had to be his left arm for some reason. Clench your butt cheeks, kid, and yell this from the depths of your heart. Smash. He felt his fist connect with the metal for a moment and only a moment. In the next, in such a short frame of time, the villain had gone flying. The Greenette looked on in shock. The villain was exploding miles away in the air. Finally, the boy's senses came back to him. This is kind of like when I tried to save Kakin. I moved without thinking. Now I have a quirk. The boy looked at his left hand. And the mark, what was that? Is the mark some quirk I never knew about? Both are real power. Just 1 minute left. He heard Present Mike announce. He finally realized he was still floating high in the air and started to fall. Don't panic. I jumped using one for all, so I should be able to use it to get down too, just like All Might. Or maybe I can use those tendrils again. Either way, landing should be a piece of cake, right? The boy tried to use his arm again, but he couldn't feel it nor his legs. What the? He looked back and saw to his horror how everything but his right arm was flapping about. I'm broken. What happened? My legs were fine before. That's my marked hand as well. You've molded your body into a proper vessel, but you did it in a hurry. So be cautious. The physical backlash of one for all can be intense. He warned me I should have listened. I can barely contain this borrowed power, even after 10 months of training. And this is just a hair of his quirk. I got way ahead of myself attacking that giant villain. I'm acting like a pro when I don't even have enough skill to be a sidekick? No, the boy decided this isn't over. There's gotta be something I can do. Another smash. It's the only chance I've got to survive. My legs and my left arm are broke, so just one option. I can do this, but if my timing's off even a little, I'm toast. Even if I live, I've got 0 points. The boy lifted his arm, preparing himself. And if I break my right arm too, then there's no way I'm gonna pass the exam. A scream left the boy's throat as he got closer and closer to the ground. Could he do it? Was it already too late? He had to do it now. Before he could, though, he felt something solid slap the side of his face, throwing him to the side. He hovered in the air before he hit the ground, so close to hitting it. Release, he heard a voice groan out before he was dropped unceremoniously onto the road. He looked up to see the girl he'd just saved on top of a bit of robot. She ended up emptying the contents of her stomach onto the road from the strain of saving him. I'm alive, that girl, she stopped my fall again. The boy could see black splotches on the edge of his vision. Sure seemed to take a lot out of her. But at least she doesn't look injured. That's a relief. That was his last thought as his consciousness suddenly faded with the adrenaline fading away, and yet, a part of him could swear he heard a voice, very clearly. You did good, even if you don't realize it. All Might found himself with many questions as the exam finished up. There was no doubt that he was proud of his student, saving the girl and defeating the villain even when it cost him. He had proven again he had chosen the right person as his successor. However, he found himself concerned, and not because of the boy's destroyed limbs. Not that he was happy about them either. As the new teacher at UA, he was allowed to watch the exam with the other staff members. When he'd seen his pupil preparing to use his quirk, he was excited to see how he did, but he only really saw the aftermath. Midoriya was fast, faster than he should have been. He had shot off faster than any of the cameras could track, and these cameras could track the blonde himself at the best of times. By the time the cameras had properly focused on the villain and the boy, he saw definitive proof something other than one for all had to be at play. The punch had the classic telltale signs of a Detroit smash, but the force behind it, even from the boost the boy would have been the 9th user, he still had generated more force than should have been possible. The blonde turned and saw the principal of the school, Nizu, looking at him. He seems to be quite a surprise, even with what we know. That was more force than anyone should be able to generate, the blonde said quietly. The principal's ears could pick up on it, but the other teachers could not. Here, All Might, Nizu said, handing him an earpiece. Recovery girl will be going to that center first. She's wearing a microphone. Maybe we can get some clue what just happened. You'll know better than I what might have happened. The blonde took the earpiece without objection as the cameras focused on the heroine the principal mentioned. A short, elderly lady with an amazing healing quirk. At least young Midoriya would be okay. He could hear some of the students around her talking. Did you see that dude's attacks? How does someone move like that? I didn't think he had that kind of power. Me either. Looked like some reinforcement type quirk, but there was something else. I wonder how he managed to redirect in the air when he overshot though? He was too high up to see what he did. All Might almost choked on his blood when he heard that. He overshot? Best guess he managed to do something with air pressure, but still, that's insane. If he has such an amazing quirk, how come he didn't snag any points all day? Maybe he was trying to trick all of us? Joke's on him. There's no way he's passing with a 0 score like that. True, but you gotta admit, those were some freaking impressive moves. Just what did you do out there, young Midoriya? All Might had to wonder. They said moves. Plural. He had done multiple things before he broke himself? That was a relief in a way. Good job. Nice work all around. You're heroes in my eyes, every one of you. Came the voice of the lady who the microphone was attached to. All Might watched as she gave some people gummies before she wandered over to his student. That mademoiselle, she's the heart of UA. One student with a French accent said. Oh my goodness, you were hurt this badly but your own quirk, Sonny? The heroine asked. All Might's sweat dropped as he felt a tiny bit of fear. He hadn't told Recovery Girl yet like he had planned. She was going to have his hind over this. The nurse's lips pursed up and she kissed the top of Midoriya's head. What's she doing? You're watching a school nurse in action. The youthful heroine, Recovery Girl. Her quirk is an awesome boost of healing power. Midoriya's body started to glow green as his limbs twisted back into place. All Might had suffered many injuries himself, but it still made him cringe watching his students' limbs do full 180s back into position. She's the reason they can even afford to hold these reckless tests. Look, she's saving him months of recovery time. Alright, he'll be fine now. Anyone else injured? The nurse asked, wandering off away from the blonde's successor. The blonde gave the earpiece back to the principal and shook his head. He couldn't deny the fact he was worried now. With the exception of protecting the secret of One for All, Midoriya wasn't a liar. All those months ago, when he said he was quirkless, he meant it, which left the blonde with a mystery on his hands. Initially, he had intended to leave the greenette alone until he learned whether or not he was accepted into UA, but now he'd have to go see the boy sooner. The staff around him were discussing the students' scores, but he was distracted. One of his and the greenette's first encounters played through his mind. No reluctance, that's exactly how I thought you would answer. The skinny blonde laughed. Considering I've distracted you a lot today, I can at least do you a favor and walk you home. Thank you so much, sir. You don't have to, but I'd be immensely grateful. The boy exclaimed. He sure did have a lot energy. No problem, it's the least I can do. The blonde assured them as they started to walk. Besides, I actually have a few questions for you I've been wondering. The boy looked up confused. For one, you said you were quirkless, but when that fight was going on, how fast you ran and the fact you almost got that boy out. You sure you don't have some small hidden quirk? The blonde asked mostly jokingly, but the greenette rushed to assure he hadn't lied about being quirkless. Relax, kid, you were being way too sincere earlier for me to think you were lying. Thank you, sir. What about your other question? The boy asked. What's with that tattoo on the back of your hand? Isn't it illegal for you to get any ink on until you're at least 16? To the blonde's surprised, a look of worry crossed the boy's face, but no over what he expected. I don't know where this came from, answered the boy, causing the blonde to stop in his tracks. I didn't even know it was there until just a couple minutes before you showed up just now. I was going to go to the hospital tomorrow to see if they had any explanation. I definitely didn't have it until after school ended today. That's odd, was all the blonde could think to say. A mysterious mark that the boy only just found out about? Well, it's probably worth noting, you've had it since I saved you from the sludge villain the first time at least. It was one of the first things I noticed about you. I certainly agree you should go to the doctor as soon as you get the chance. The boy nodded, looking off into the distance. Right? I just hope it isn't some lasting mark from that villain or something. Though Kakin didn't have one, so that wouldn't make much sense. Maybe it's a late quirk developing? The blonde joked before he realized that it probably wasn't in good taste. Oh, sorry young Midoriya. I should have thought before I spoke. No, it's okay all dash. The blonde stood up abruptly in the present day, drawing the attention of those around him. Many quirked eyebrows. Sorry. He quickly apologized, embarrassed, before turning to leave the room. I'll be back in a moment. Once the blonde was out the room, he went to the nearest bathroom. It was a paranoid way doing things, but one for all required the strictest precautions to keep safe. Once he was in a stall, he opened up his contacts and found who he was looking for. Midoriya, my boy. Young Midoriya. We must talk ASAP regarding your quirk. Usual location, 7 p.m. With that done, all the blonde could do was return to the room and help his new colleagues. Wasn't sure if he wanted to be right or wrong about his new theory regarding his student. All Might. The blonde heard his successor calling after him. He turned to see the boy running to him. He stopped just as he arrived, almost doubling other as he caught his breath. He had a bandage wrapped around the arm he had broken earlier. Why, you needed to talk? Kid, did you run all the way here? The skinny man asked in surprise before remembering himself. Oh, and when I'm like this, don't go shouting out my name like that. Right, sorry. The boy said before his gaze wandered down the ground. And sorry about everything else. You trusted me with your power, trained me for months, which would have eaten into your own free time, and I made it all pointless by failing the exams so badly. You said you wanted to talk about One for All. I assume you want me to give it to someone else. All Might cursed himself, realizing what his sudden text right after the exam would have looked like to his pupil. He wasn't allowed to reveal his pupil's results, so he'd have to be careful how he said this. No. Don't think like that. I picked you before I ever knew you wanted to go to UDA. Whether you failed the exam or not, you're still my student and my successor. I'd train you myself personally if it was required. The greenette looked up in shock, before the telltale signs appeared that he was going to cry. The blonde almost groaned. Seriously, kid, you sure there's nothing wrong with your eyes? Wipe them away. The boy listened, trying to dry his eyes. If you still want me to have it, then what do we need to talk about? All Might looked off into the distance. He wondered how Midoriya would take this news. You're too powerful. I was watching the exam, which you already know. When you took on that 0-pointer, I was quite proud. You harnessed One for All successfully and saved that girl. That's what any good hero would do. But the speed at which you moved at and the strength you possessed, it's much greater than it ever should have been. The blonde exclaimed, causing the greenette to almost fall over in shock. Seriously? Didn't you say it gets stronger from user to user though? Is it not just that? The boy asked. The blonde could already see the boy's analytic mind spring into action in his eyes. Do you remember when we were walking to your home together on the day we first met, what I said about your mark? That it was odd? No, just after that. Oh, the boy exclaimed. You made a joke about it being a late quirk? The blonde nodded. But what's that got to? Oh. The boy caught up quickly. Midoriya, my boy. I need you to tell me everything that happened in that exam once you tried to save that girl. Leave no detail untold. And so the blonde spent the next 5 minutes listening to all the boy had to say. About the tendrils, the voice, the way the mark glowed up. Due to the pain and the worry about losing the exam, the boy had ended up shoving it all to the back of his mind. By the end, neither of them had any doubts. The mark had to be some type of quirk based on how it works. That would also explain when you ran into that fight with the sludge villain. All Might said, causing the greenette to look up confused. Remember I said you moved pretty fast and did pretty well getting the boy out until he started struggling against you as well. I had brushed it off as just pure adrenaline, but now I see I was being ignorant. You had the mark at the time, so? The boy had no idea how to respond. What does this mean for One for All? Whatever those tendrils are that you mentioned, One for All will make them powerful than they originally would have been, and they're only going to get stronger. Tendrils plus physical enhancements. What an odd quirk. I'm still no 100% on that, said Midoriya, drawing in All Might's attention. My mum is a telekinetic type and my dad apparently had a fire-breathe quirk. None of my immediate family had physical enhancements or tendrils as quirks. It certainly is odd. I do believe you should have a long talk with your mother about it. Did you tell her about Yuge developing a power in the middle of the exam like we discussed? Not yet. Probably for the best. If the mark has physical enhancements of its own, then I can hide one for all by saying the power came from the mark. Good idea, young Midoriya. One other thing, it will interest you to know I will be more local from now on. Just before we met, I applied for a position at UA as a teacher. All Might told him, causing the greenette to look up in shock. Wait, really? Midoriya exclaimed, his surprise getting the better of him. Yeah. They didn't want me telling anyone till they made an official announcement, but I felt like you deserve to know. The blonde admitted as he stared out into the ocean. Seemed like fortunate timing. You were going to give one for all to one of the students. Someone with a strong quirk, I guess? The boy asked as he caught up. Someone who would have had better control than me. When I used your power, I broke my bones, completely wrecked my body. I could only take down one villain. I can't control it, what do I do? You'll learn to manage it in time. Complete mastery over such a power doesn't come overnight. It would be like asking a baby to run a marathon. You gotta learn how to walk first. All Might explained. Yeah, wait, you knew I'd get hurt that badly? Midoriya couldn't believe the man had neglected to mention that detail. For as much as he idolized him, Midoriya found himself thinking that common sense wasn't his hero's biggest strong suit. Well, we were in a time crunch and I didn't want to hold you up in case you missed the exam. But it turned out all right. Plus now you know what you're dealing with. The blonde exclaimed, picking up a few cans of the ground, causing Midoriya to scowl lightly. 10 months cleaning this place and people still keep littering here. Think of it like this. Right now your quirk is all or nothing. 0 or a 100. One day, you'll learn how to control your output, thus being able to control just how much power you're using. So I need control. It's not like I didn't realize that much. The boy complained lightly. He didn't want to sound ungrateful, but broken bones was not a part of his hero plan. You're overflowing with energy, and quite clearly from what we saw, it's a lot of energy. The more training you do, the better your body can hold it. All Might explained before suddenly buffing up into his muscle form and crushing the cans. Then it's yours to command. The blonde powered down again, likely to save energy before he continued. You can harness one for all. It's simple. You have to feel it. The skinny man exclaimed, throwing his hands out wide. Can you maybe be a little more specific, please? The greenette pleaded, not understanding his mentor who had started punching the air. You now know what it's like to fire on all cylinders, right? Yeah, like a bunch of shattered bones. Midoriya deadpanned. No, I mean the rush inside. You must have felt it coursing through you. What was it like? The freckle-faced boy took a moment to think, however he could only think of various sound effects to try to describe the sensation. Like a WSH or K-pow or, oh I got it. Like an egg exploding in a microwave. The blonde sprayed out some blood as he laughed at the comparison. That's pretty boring, kid, but okay. If that's the metaphor you want to go with, then decrease the cooking time or lower the wattage. Whatever you do, focus on making sure the egg doesn't explode, alright? I can do that. You gotta keep trying. Control isn't going to happen overnight, but the more you focus on that image, the faster you'll learn. All Might finished, giving him a thumbs up. Right? Thanks, All Might. Oh, I should probably get going soon. My mom needed me back earlier. Alright, just one more thing. The student and mentor talked a little more about the fine details of the events to see if they could glean any more clues, but no avenue bore any more fruit for thought. Finally, Midoriya had to make his way home. The blonde couldn't help feeling guilty when he saw the sulk in his successor as he walked away. He knew he couldn't tell him the actual results of the exam, but that didn't make letting him continue to believe he'd failed easy at all. He would find out the truth soon enough, though. Young Midoriya was going to UA like he always wanted. Footsteps echoed down the far-reaching hallway as Midoriya ran to find his class. He only had a few more minutes and no idea if he was close. 1A, he muttered to himself as he went down the halls until, there it is. Whoa, what the? The boy slowed as he walked to the door, which went almost all the way up to the roof. Is there giants in this class or something? The boy lifted his hand to the handle as his mind pondered who could be in here. He almost froze when he realized it could be the blue-haired boy or even Kakin. Kakin. While he had no idea if the blue-haired boy had gotten into the school, Kakin definitely had. He had been with the Greenette when the teacher had called them up to congratulate them on getting into UA. Kakin was not happy after that. The Greenette also remembered how much the opposite his mom had been this morning. Despite his rush to get out, he still was happy she stopped him to say what she did. Izuku, I'm really proud of you, son. Midoriya shook his head to clear the thoughts. Now wasn't the time. Besides, what was the chances either one of those two would be in his class? With that, he gently opened the door and immediately ended up cursing his luck. Take your feet off that desk now, came the strict, harsh tone of the blue-haired boy, which were answered by the goading, rough tones of Midoriya's blonde nightmare. You're kidding me, right? The blonde asked while glaring at the taller boy. The two started to argue, but it all went through one ear and out the other for Midoriya, too busy lamenting his luck. No one had noticed his arrival yet due to the fight. Why did I have to end up with both of them? He yelled internally. It's quite the amusing scenario if you ask me. That didn't fail to make the boy stumble over in fear and surprise, drawing everyone's attention. The first day and already he was making a fool of himself. Where did that voice come from? Was it the same one from the exam? It's him, he heard the blue-haired boy say, as if in shock before the boy started marching towards him. I'm Tenya Ida, from Sumai Academy. Hi, I am Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you all. The boy started fidgeting nervously, looking skywards to avoid anyone's gazes. I must apologize, Midoriya, Ida said, getting the Greenette's attention. And confusion. You realize there was something else to the exam. You must be very perceptive. I completely misjudged you. You are a much superior student than I. The smaller boy sweat dropped. I find that hard to believe. He took a moment to look around who was in his class. They were all interesting, but the real standouts were a boy with a bird head, one with two-tone hair, a small boy with balls in place of hair, a girl with earphone jacks, and a pink-skinned girl. There were so many quirks he'd have to analyze and learn about here. Hey, I recognize that messed-up hair. Falling boy. A familiar voice said from behind the Greenette, causing him to turn in surprise to see her talking about what he did at the exam. No way. It's her. I knew she got in on recommendations, but I didn't think I'd be lucky enough for us to be in the same class. She looks really nice in that uniform. Oh hey hi. Uraraka, right? So, I should probably thank you for going in and talking to him. How'd you know about that? They talked for a little while, just a few minutes. Uraraka had been really surprised and embarrassed to find out what she did was in the boy's acceptance letter. I wonder what our teachers are like. I can't wait to meet everybody. If you're just here to make friends, you can pack up and leave, came a gruff voice. Midoriya looked around Uraraka to see a man on the floor wrapped up in a yellow sleeping bag. What the heck? It took 8 seconds before you all shut up. That's not going to do. Time is precious. Rational students would understand that, the man said, standing up and unzipping his sleeping bag. Midoriya's the Greenette's eyes widened. It was definitely the same voice as the one from the exam. You are not going to trust me so soon, I'm sure. I don't really care. I'm simply along for the ride, but I will warn you now. That man, for all his talk of rationality, is anything but when it comes to teaching. Be careful or your first day of school will also be your last. That was certainly foreboding. The Greenette eyed the man warily. So he was a teacher according to the voice? Was the voice part of his late quirk, or was the Greenette going insane? Either way, the boy decided to heed its warning. He had no reason to trust it, but also none to distrust it yet. Just who is this guy? If he's here, then he has to be some kind of pro, but he looks so worn out. That voice made him seem like a teacher. Hello, I'm Shota Aizawa. Your teacher? The class all seemed to shout or recoil in shock from that. Midoriya's gaze hardened. The voice wasn't wrong about that, though that hardly eased Midoriya now. The man started rummaging around the bag he had before pulling out a gym outfit. Let's get to it. Put these on and head outside. The man left the outfits on the table at the front and waited on everyone taking a suit before leading them outside. All the while Midoriya found himself absorbed into his thoughts. The voice was back. He had no idea if that was a positive or a negative. What did Aizawa have in mind? The voice certainly didn't seem to think highly of him. The stress was getting to be too much and Midoriya quickly found himself using the trick he'd picked up at the exam to handle it, dropping into his memories. He remembered his old class's registry list, some of the days at the beach with All Might and talking with his mom. His mom. The greenette took a deep breath. How was he going to explain this to his mom? It seemed such a simple task at the beach. He couldn't just go, "Oh hey mom, by the way I have a quirk now and it completely wrecks my body." You what? Midoriya blinked. His mom had sprayed her drink across the room and was staring at him in shock. Oh crap, that was supposed to be internal. I'm sorry to spring the news on you like that. During the exam, there was this girl. He looked and saw his mom was giving him her full undivided attention, a joy and worry in her eyes. He'd already gotten this far, no point in stopping now. There was this robot, it was big. I don't know what they were thinking putting it in an exam like that full of untrained students. This girl, she got trapped under some rubble and the robot, it was bearing down on her fast. Everyone was too busy running away to notice. Well, almost everyone. Izuku, you didn't? She said. The woman had a slight fear in her eyes. That definitely made the boy guilty. He knew his mum would have a heart attack learning her son had jumped into danger like that, but no one else saw her but me. I forgot it was an exam. In that moment all I could see was someone who needed help and no one helping, the boy admitted. I don't even know when I'd gotten on my feet. I was moving on instinct. One moment I was on the ground, the next I was flying through the air. You were flying? His mom asked, clear confusion running through her. But that's nothing like me or your father's quirk? Well, I wasn't literally flying, it was just the force of my jump. But yeah, the quirk I have really isn't at all like you or his. Izuku basically hissed the last word. Do you remember the day when I came back with this? He said, showing the back of his left hand to his mother. I could hardly forget. The woman said in an anxious voice. The shock and disappointment when I thought it was a tattoo alone has seared the whole experience into my brain. Again, I'm so sorry for how I acted. Especially after already such a rough day for you. Midoriya took a breather. It still hurt remembering how his mom had reacted. She hadn't been happy. Rarely did he see her angry, and knowing he was the cause, even if he technically wasn't, really eat away at him. After he had finally gotten her to let him explain, she had immediately run off to phone the doctors and was a panicking frenzy. They had gone to the doctors, but they had found all it could be was some odd birthmark that appeared really late. Both son and mother knew how ridiculous that was, leaving the mystery of the mark unsolved. At least now he definitely knew his mom was not fond of tattoos. When Izuku had returned to school, he had ended up running with the idea that it had come from Bakugo trying to get a tattoo from someone with an inking quirk, but the person somehow messing up their aim with Midoriya in the vicinity. After all, an accidental tattoo was less likely to get him more bullying from the others than a villain mark or birthmark. It was a terrible lie, but the class bought it. Midoriya had come up with it in the moment though and expected Bakugo to be all over his case about it, but for some reason the blonde never objected. The greenette got up from his seat and went to hug his mom. It's not your fault, you couldn't have known. So what about the mark? The woman asked as the boy pulled away. The boy looked at the remote over on the table. I wonder. I'll show you, watch my hand, he said, and she complied. He had no idea if he could do this, but he'd only learn about his new power by using it so. The mark glowed blue as Midoriya's hands made a claw shape, causing the woman to gasp. Midoriya focused on the remote. He almost swore he could see a blue marker around it guiding him. Finally the greenette tried to summon the tendrils, remembering what they felt like before. Both the greenettes were in for a shock when there was no small black tendrils but instead one big black and purple tentacle wrapped in smaller tendrils that shot out from the boy's palm. It wrapped around the remote and pulled it back with force, disappearing before the remote had made its way back to the boy's hand. Wait, Ino. The boy shouted as the remote came sailing through the air before clocking him hard, knocking him over. Izuku! He heard his mom shout as he laid on the floor clutching his head. That hurt. He could almost swear he heard a male voice laughing somewhere. His mom came to him with a first aid kit. What was that? I don't know. The boy groaned as his mother dabbed his head with a cold cloth. I was trying to make the small tendrils I had in the exam. That was so much stronger though. Is that what One for All did to Quirks? But it didn't feel like it activated there. Interesting, Far Reach. That's the name of that power. Midoriya was brought out his memories as they finally arrived at the field. The voice again, was he going to hear it so much more now? Their teacher explained that they would be doing a quirk assessment test in place of orientation. They were going to be scored based on the results. Using their quirks would get them more points than if they just did the exercises normally. They were pretty much being scored on their ability to cheat using their powers. The part that really had Midoriya worried was the punishment for whoever scored the last. Scoring the least meant they had no potential as a hero and thus would be expelled. Suddenly the boy understood the voice's criticism of the teacher. It turned out to not be all the voice had to say about the teacher either. 2 years ago, Shota Aizawa expelled 7 different students, all on the same day. 3 would have been heroes rivaling the likes of the top 10 heroes. One still considers switching to the side of villainy to this day. One day they might find that little push. I wonder if they'll come back for the man who made them think it was all they had. Midoriya couldn't say he completely agreed with the voice's logic. If that one person goes down the path of villainy for that reason, that was their own choice. He still found himself slowly starting to dislike his teacher though. The tired pro had made Bakugo throw a softball to show them the kinds of things they'd be doing. The greenette's jaw dropped when the blonde got a score of 705.2 m. The greenette gulped as he walked up to the start of the 50-meter dash. He'd be going against Bakugo because of course he would be. Fate just loved him that way. He could only activate One for All at 100% right now. And he had next to zero training with his Far Reach, as the voice had called it. He couldn't rely on either right now. If he did, he could end up causing too many problems for himself. One for All would break him and he had no idea what he could even do with Far Reach. It was so frustrating. He shook his head. There was only one thing for it. He had to do the test quirkless. He knew he had the physically enhancements from the mark, but without One for All they were barely noticeable. By the 5th test, Midoriya was ready to keel over and just collapse. He had scored horribly on all the tests so far. His attempts to see if he could harness a lower power of One for All were all fruitless and he didn't dare try bringing Far Reach into the mix. He knew it now. He had started with the foolish notion he could somehow pass the quirk test without using his. He had to take a risk in the next test with One for All or Far Reach. It didn't matter which. There was no way he was going to beat the score Uraraka just got, that was for sure. Super strength or not, he doubted he could reach infinity. Everyone was clamoring over the girl's score. It was definitely impressive, but the boy's mind was clouded with other issues. He walked up for his turn, picking up the ball and observing it. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. It didn't matter what he did, he just had to do it. All that's left is this, the distance run and the seated toe touch. No matter what I use, it's now or never. Far Reach or One for All, this is my best chance to use them. He could hear Ida and Bakugo talking about him, but he tried his best to ignore it. Izuku, I'm really proud of you, son. His scores had been terrible so far and he had no way of knowing the full strength of Far Reach. If he wanted a good score, it had to be One for All. Otherwise he'd be expelled after everything he did to get here. Young man, you too can become a hero. He gritted his teeth and let the power course through his arm, winding back and moving into the throw. This is it. I won't let them down. The ball sailed through the air, all of 46 meters before falling back to earth. No. What gives? I was trying to use it just now. He asked no one in particular as he stared at his hand. I erased your quirk, came the gruff voice of his teacher. He turned to see the scarf he'd been wearing flying all around and his hair swept away in the breeze. His eyes glowed red. The judges for this exam were not rational enough. For all his talk of being rational, that man is anything but. Someone like you should never be allowed to enroll at this school. The man said simply. That definitely hurt to hear, but Midoriya found himself hung up on another detail. Wait, you did what to Maya? The boy cut himself off as he noticed the goggles hanging around the man's neck. Those goggles. I know you. You can look at someone and cancel out their powers. You're the underground erasure hero, Eraserhead. His sudden exclamation got the other all talking. Most seemed to never have heard of him, which didn't surprise the boy. He barely knew anything despite his fanboying over all types of heroes. Midoriya almost hissed in discomfort as he heard a familiar drone in his ear but no voice. You're not ready. You don't have control over your power. Is that not your job? To teach those who make it in to learn how to use their powers? If a student is unable to properly control their power now, surely a teacher's job should be first to assess the quirk and see if they can help. The voice certainly sounded annoyed. Midoriya did his best to focus on the teacher in front of him instead. Were you planning on breaking your bones again? Counting on someone else to save your useless body? The man asked accusingly. No, that's not what dash. The boy never got to finish his sentence as the man's scarf came at him and wrapped around him, dragging him to the teacher against his will. In a way, he envied Bakuga's fierce nature, cause then maybe he'd have the guts to tear the scarf apart like a part of him wanted to. No matter what your intentions are, you would be nothing more than a liability in battle. You have the same reckless overzealousness as another hero I know, a hero who saved 1,000 people by himself and became a legend. But even with that drive, you're worthless if you can only throw a single punch without breaking down. With your power, there's no way you can become a hero. Sorry, Midoriya, but you have zero potential. No matter what, that won't change in the time you need it to in order to pass. The man's words pierced into like daggers. But the final sentence stuck out among the rest as the man let him go. I've returned your impractical quirk. Go take your final throw. You'll either break your entire arm or you'll score pathetically. That's simply how it is. As Midoriya walked back, the pro's speech played through his mind. He was sure the voice would probably tell him to ignore him. The voice. Can you hear me? The boy thought as he stopped at the stand. The ball on the floor. Yes, I can. The voice seemed almost surprised that the boy was talking to it. The boy had no idea if this would work, but the voice had seemed to have knowledge Midoriya definitely didn't. What do you want? Can I make him stop judging people so quick, even if I fail? Is there a way I can convince not to judge others so quickly in future? He whispered that aloud, bending down to pick up the ball. This was it he had to commit. Maybe. You surprise me. I can't reveal how, but right now, in this moment, you have the power to show him his failing yes. How? You must figure out yourself. The voice told him. The boy breathed. This time, this is really it? He thought for a moment, what could he possibly do? As he thought, he realized the word that had come up multiple times today that he had somehow missed. Potential. He looked down at the mark. He had way more potential than he's shown at all. And as he thought, he also realized the exact words the teacher had said departing. Entire arm, entire. Midoriya's gaze hardened and he switched the ball to his left hand. He knew what he needed to do. He had refused to take risks before, but now it was his best shot. Everyone watched in confusion. Isn't he right-handed? He threw with his right before. Midoriya focused on the ball. He had to focus. Could he even do this with far reach? He had no idea, but he had to try. Instead of throwing it forward, he threw it up the way, using only his marked hand first. Even if it's not the same with his methods, Mr. Aizawa was right about me. Midoriya shot his left hand forward, summoning his far reach like he did in his living room. It grabbed tight of the ball. He could already hear shocked gasps all around. Now it was time for the coup de grace. The greenette focused on making sure the tentacle stayed manifested unlike before as he swung his body around in circles, building up moment. This power, it manifests by materializing from my palm around my fingers, but I can still feel them underneath. If I use far reach as a conductor for one for all, the boy put two of his finger together inside the appendage, summoning one for all into only his finger. I will become a hero. He flicked his fingers, feeling the force start blasting through the appendage. For its part, the tentacle contained it amazingly well as the pressure traveled up it, only small bursts appearing throughout. He could hear the shouts of awe around him. 2 quirks or no, I still have to work way harder than anyone else here to succeed. Even if I have a lot to learn, I'll focus on what I can do right now. An image of Uraraka releasing her anti-gravity quirk went through his mind as the pressure reached the tip. Now, it was his best chance to control it. Release. It certainly winded the boy, but he didn't have the time to catch his breath. He had felt the ball release with some great speed. Just a few seconds later. Boom. The boy covered his ears and looked up shocked like everyone else. There was no way that was what he thought was it. There was no way he could produce sonic boom. Suddenly a sharp flare went through his fingers and he uncovered his ears to grab them. He looked to see only his finger was broken, like he had hoped. He turned to his teacher who was looking straight at him. Mr. Aizawa, you see, I'm still standing. The teacher smiled at him with a really creepy smile as Midoriya caught his breath. He said something but the boy didn't hear it. I didn't think far reach could be used like that. You really are something else. To say All Might was impressed was the understatement of the century. He'd been watching the quirk test Aizawa had devised to make sure his student was all right. After all, Aizawa wasn't known for letting people like Midoriya stay at UA. The blonde knew that Midoriya possessed far more power than he'd originally anticipated, actually properly getting to see it and feel it himself. That sonic boom was proof. Midoriya was already terrifyingly strong within weeks of getting one for all. Holy crap, kid. You really put the Ultra in plus Ultra. Your fingers are broken but not your whole hand? The blonde found a giddy feeling rising inside him as he assessed his successor's performance. You knew you needed a high score but couldn't afford to break your whole hand, so you threw the ball with your stronger hand and grabbed it with your new powers, making sure it was hollow on the inside to let the pressure travel. Instead of channeling the powers into your whole arm, you restricted it to your fingers and let the air pressure to launch it. You used the extra height and momentum from your tendril thing to make up for the force you lost by not using your whole arm, minimizing the injury to your body while possibly maximizing the throw. More than one for all alone could. What the hell, young Midoriya? How did you go and get so cool? That was it. That was what the blonde was feeling, proud of his successor. The muscular man watched the scene unfold. It was subtle, but he could see the change in Aizawa's eyes regarding Midoriya. The Greenette's classmates were all over the place. Half were talking amongst themselves how probably the only who'd beat the boy was the girl before him. The rest were too busy being stunned or recovering from the loud boom. All Might constantly found himself grateful for his massively increased hearing from One for All. This was no exception as Aizawa announced Midoriya's score. 10-20 meters. That brought the stunned students out of their stupor. Didn't take long for the praise to start. Of course it wasn't from Aizawa. Nice. He's finally showing us what he can really do, exclaimed a brown-haired girl. She seemed to be the one his students saved in the exam. Uraraka? He wanted to say Uraraka. Uraraka seemed pretty happy about it. That tentacle was quite the surprise. I thought his quirk was simply an enhancement type. That would explain his ability to redirect himself in the exam. A blue-haired boy said. He stood quite tall. All Might could tell straight away he must be an Ida from his features. Looks just like Ingenium. He broke his fingers, like in the exam. This quirk is very odd. Ida continued. It had quite a flair to it until the end. A blonde boy with a French accent said. With a bit of work he could be as pretty as moi. As All Might's gaze continued to wander over the students, he spotted the blonde boy he saved so many months ago. Katsuki Bakugu. There was one student he had taken the time to learn plenty about. With how Midoriya often described him, he felt it best to be prepared. The smaller blonde had his jaw dropped and quite an unflattering look of shock plastered on his face. Guess that answered the new teacher's question of whether he knew about Midoriya's new quirks yet. All Might couldn't help his instinctual reaction to step out the shadows as explosions start happening around the boy's hand. He knew it would cause a scene though and stepped back in with a bit of guilt. Aizawa can handle it. Don't push yourself more than needed. Hey, you bastard. Tell me how you did that or you're dead. The blonde screamed furiously. The Greenette seemed to almost freeze up as the blonde rocketed towards him. Before the boy could get close enough to do any damage though, Aizawa's scarf came flying through the air and trapped the blonde in place. Hey, what the? Bakugu shouted in surprise. Why the hell is your scarf so damn strong? Because it's a capture weapon made out of carbon fiber and a special metal alloy. Stand down. The scruffy teacher demanded. It would wise to avoid making me use my quirk so much. It gives me serious dry eye. You're wasting my time now, whoever's next can step up. Midoriya cautiously walked around the blonde, who seemed almost as though he was paralyzed on the spot before running off to join Uraraka, who fussed over his finger. Young Bakugu, according to Midoriya, you're a prideful one. To have him so firmly beat you? The muscular man made a mental note to keep an eye on the younger blonde when he could. The rest of the events didn't prove all that interesting. Midoriya wasn't going to use one for all and destroy himself more when he was trying to avoid it, and the pro presumed that Midoriya didn't want to risk seeing what effects his broken finger would have on his tendril tentacle when he still needed to complete the tests ahead. Now it was time to see the scores. The blonde's breath hitched into his throat. Aizawa was rarely one to go back on his words, and he had said whoever scored lowest was to be expelled. Midoriya may have had a beyond exceptional result for the ball throw, but that was only one test. The first 5 he had performed somewhat above average, likely thanks to his mark. But the last 3, he had severely underperformed. Could the boy get away with his performance? Even if he was just second last, it would keep him in the running. The list formed into existence. 1. Momo Yaoyuzu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugu. 4. Tenya Ida. 5. Fumikage Tokoyami. 6. Mizo Shoji. 7. Mashireo Ojiro. 8. Aijiro Kirishima. 9. Mina Ishido 10. Achiko Uraraka. 11. Koji Koda 12. Rikido Sato. 13. Tsuyu Azui 14. Yuga Oyama. 15. Hanta Siro 16. Denki Kaminari. 17. Kyoka Gyre, tied, 17. Izuku Midoriya, tied. 18. Toru Hagakure. 19. Minoru Mineta. The blonde let out the breath he was holding. In the crowd he could his successor looking similarly relieved. One small student with purple balls for hair seemed to be shaking in fear. Was that the Mineta on the list? Poor kid didn't last long. And I was lying, no one's going home, the tired pro announced. That was just a rational deception to make sure you gave it your all on the test. The class were all shouting amongst each other dismay. Some seemed to already presume that it was a ruse. All Might suddenly had the overwhelming urge to punch the wall beside him. Midoriya. Here, go see the old woman about your finger, Aizawa said, handing the boy a slip to see the nurse before wandering towards where All Might had been observing. Oh, and tell her I noticed something odd. Your bones don't break immediately. Wait, what? The boy shouted, surprised. That caused the pro to stop. A look of confusion on his face. You haven't noticed? Your fingers didn't immediately turn all bruised when you finished your throw. They only bruised up after a few moments of inactivity. I suppose you've just brushed the lack of pain of initially as adrenaline, yeah? The boy answered, clearly unsure. All Might looked up from his coffee as Izuku fidgeted nervously in the armchair across from him. The blonde had tried to reprimand the boy's teacher but had just made himself look a fool. He had returned here to rest, and at the end of the school day Midoriya had showed up. Uraraka had tagged along but stayed outside. The boy had just finished recounting the voice in his head and what the voice had told him. Curious and curiouser, that mark? All Might couldn't find the words to describe what he wanted to say. He had looked up the facts the voice had told Midoriya and they all checked out. He would ask Nisa later if they could check up on those kids just in case. Well, I can't say much more than be cautious. Even in this world of superpowers, hearing voices is rarely a good thing. The greenette just gave a slight nod as he stared at the ground. Both found themselves eyeing the pattern on the back of the boy's hand. I want you to know, I wasn't sure whether I should have let you show multiple powers or not. The greenette looked up panicked at the idea he had accidentally gone against the blonde's wishes. Relax, after seeing that display, it seems silly to prevent you from using them. You need to learn about using one for all and far reach, you said the voice called it? School can help with both, so no point in hiding, right? The boy said with a sigh of relief. So tomorrow will be your first time with real hero training. The blonde clapped his hands, knowing the subject would definitely bring out his pupil's cheery side. What did you have your quirk registered as, if I may ask? After all, there's a lot going on with you. Mark. I just had it registered as Mark. The boy told him. It hides one for all, explains the well mark, and is vague enough that no one will really question any odd design features I'll need for my costume. Smart. The blonde approved. I'll be honest with you, my boy. I am a little nervous about tomorrow. Going from 1 pupil to 20 won't be easy. The greenette was up on his feet in no time. You'll do great, All Might. You're the #1 pro for a reason, so I bet you'll be the best teacher. That got a laugh from the blonde, which caused some blood to spray out. I think your fanboying might be getting in the way of realistic expectations, but thanks, kid. It helps. The blonde then smirked. Speaking of great, so your body doesn't immediately get destroyed by 1 for all? That's some pretty good news. What exactly did Recovery Girl say? The boy scratched the back of his head and shut his eyes with a soft smile. She has a theory that when 1 for all is active and I'm still moving, the damage doesn't take place. It only appears once I stop moving, which is why I wasn't hurt until after I took out the 0-pointer at the exam. My own theory is that the mark must have something to do with why that's the case. Makes sense, the blonde said, sipping his coffee. The boy sat back down and started fidgeting. The blonde had spent enough time with the boy to pick up on his habits. Whenever he wanted to ask something or say something but thought the man would berate him for it, he'd fidget. He rarely did berate him. The boy's self-confidence still needed work. What do you want to ask, young Midoriya? Well, the boy started before trailing off, like he was trying to find the right words. I don't want to cut into any more of your precious time when I already stole so much of it during those 10 months, but I took a massive risk using far reach in the test. I still have barely any idea how it works, and I should probably make sure I have at least some idea before I use it in any lessons. Understandable. The blonde said. He could already see where this was going and found himself resting the urge to roll his eyes at his protege. It was hardly his fault his confidence was so down. I was wondering if, maybe, you'd spend some time with me and try to help me train using far reach? The boy asked nervously. I fired Antoine thoughts fine. I totally understand that it was probably pretty presumped to soft meadows catalamsriashadongyo f-. Can you develop a 3rd quirk please that mutates a zip on your mouth? The blonde asked, exasperated. He stood up and put a hand on his kid's shoulder. Listen, my boy. I was your teacher even before I joined UA. It's my job to train you. You should never be afraid to ask, 'cause training you will never be a burden, okay? The blonde did roll his eyes when tears formed in the greenettes. What the blonde wasn't expecting was the sudden hug from the boy. Thank you. The blonde, once he realized what was happening, returned the hug. All right, kid, that's enough with the sappy stuff. Isn't that girl waiting for you? That caused a massive blush on the boy. Right, Uraraka, I shouldn't have left her waiting so long. The boy turned and hurried out the door. Bye, All Might. See you later, kid. And I'll text you where to meet up later. Now go get your girlfriend. The blonde teased as the boy ran off. There was a squeak that unmistakably came from Midoriya. The blonde went for another sip of coffee but almost ended up spilling it over himself in surprise when he heard a voice behind him. Well, looks like someone's already getting one well with some of the students. Midnight giggled. Another pro at the school with long purple hair and a very provocative outfit. It gets me all excited just thinking about it. You really need help? The blonde groaned. I get help weekly from Hisashi, I'll have you know. The woman said with a wink, causing the blonde to spray his drink across the room and making her laugh. Kidding. Not for the first time, All Might found himself laughing himself to death at his successor. It was probably a bit mean, but the boy has turned into a walking slapstick routine while training his far reach. The blonde had brought them to a large abandoned warehouse near the beach they used to work at. It was completely empty on one side and the other had loads of miscellaneous items scattered about. It proved to be the perfect space to work on the boy's powers. They had first used the empty space to get the boy used to summoning his power. They quickly found no matter what, the tentacle would always come out at the same length if it had nothing to grab onto. Midoriya could keep it active, but if he did, he would quickly tire out. After that, Midoriya had suggested they replicate the incident with the TV remote that happened at his house but try to have the boy catch the items. They had gone up to the higher floor to practice, near a broken window. It had turned out to be good training as well as a good bunch of laughs for All Might. The boy had a talent for having the things he pulled barely miss his hand and hit him in the face or chest instead. The first time the blonde had been concerned, the 20 consecutive times he'd risked causing more damage to his stomach from the laughs. The blonde didn't think he'd laugh as much when Izuku got ready to try again. It was starting to lose its charm. Of course, when he had expectations, Midoriya had a way of far surpassing and destroying them. The boy summoned his power again and completely missed the items this time. They were both in for a surprise. Tentacle stuck to the wall just behind the table and Midoriya got yanked through the air towards it. Ag! The boy shouted in surprise as the skinny blonde almost collapsed from laughter. Holy crap, kid. You sure hero work is your calling and not comedy work? The blonde laughed. As he finally calmed down, they both took a break and sat on the ledge of the broken window. That was weird. The shorter of the two said in reference to the wall incident. I wonder. The blonde said aloud as he thought about the power. Hey kid, I know it tires you out, but you think you could keep it summoned for a minute? The boy did as he asked and All Might ran his hand across the tentacle. Just like I thought, it's all sticky. The blonde smirked at the kid. It would be pretty good for navigation if you figure out how clearly. Even without one for all, this is a pretty amazing power, kid. I wonder why it took so long to manifest then if it's a quirk. The boy said, examining it. You sure like to look at it, that's for sure. The blonde joked, causing the greenette to look up surprised. Oh, well, I guess it's just physical reminder that I actually have powers now. Hurts though? The boy said, alarming the man. Wait, what do you mean hurts? The blonde asked concerned. Oh, I didn't want to worry you. It's nothing serious, just whenever I use the far reach my hand kind of flares in pain. Not much, it's bearable. I thought it was just cause of breaking myself during the exam and earlier today, but now I think about it. It hurt when it activated at the exam as well, even before I destroyed my arm. The boy admitted. It's nothing I can't handle though. For goodness sake, the blonde sighed, exasperated. Promise me you'll talk to Recovery Girl about it at least. That could be serious, right? I'm sorry for not doing it yet. The greenette apologized. It's just, so much else was happening, it slipped my mind. Well, at least you, the blonde had made to get up as he was talking but ended up standing on one of the items neither had noticed, causing the blonde to slip and fall backwards out the window to Midoriya's horror. All Might! The boy shouted in shock. On instinct he leaned out the window and threw his left hand forward, summoning his power. At the same time, the man bulked up into his muscle form. The boy had forgotten about that. Oh crap, I'm going to get pulled out by his weight. At least, that's what the boy thought, but to both their surprise when the tentacle wrapped around All Might, he was stopped in the air. He was definitely heavy but not enough to pull the boy out like he thought. The muscular man looked up and laughed. Nice work, Midoriya. Why don't you see if you can pull me up from there? I don't have the strength for that. The greenette cried out. Come on. You won't know until you try. The blonde encouraged him. The greenette cursed his mentor but listened, pulling. To his surprise, while it was no easy task, he actually could pull the man back up. It took a fair few minutes, but eventually the blonde had climbed back in through the window and powered down to his skinny state. Nice job, kid. The greenette didn't reply, instead opting to lie on the floor panting. And hey, now we know you can carry some seriously heavy loads? The blonde laughed. Take a breather, then I think we should start experimenting with traveling using that power. The two ended up spending another 4 hours training. The boy was just finally starting to get used to the momentum of the power and how far he could travel when he got a phone call from his mom wondering where in the heck he was. The boy looked at his phone and nearly dropped it in surprise when he realized it was 11:30. The two departed, apologizing to each other for taking up so much of the other's time. As All Might watched Midoriya run home, he smiled. Hopefully the accidental extra time training would give the boy the confidence to use it tomorrow. After all, the blonde was quite excited to see what the boy could do with his brains and that power. Izuku let out a sigh of relief as the teacher, present Mike, announced he was right about the question on the board. His English wasn't amazing, but it was better than some others in the class. He quickly learned when a blonde boy called Kaminari identified a phone as a shoe. The voice had been mostly quiet since the Quirk test. Midoriya wasn't sure to be thankful for the peace or mournful for the loss of someone who could have taught him more about his power. He set his mind to the previous day of school. Not that there was much interesting about it, but it helped him relax. He had learned that if he relied on Recovery Girl's quirk, it could kill him. That was a shock. He had also become fast friends with Ida and Uraraka. He couldn't believe he had accepted Deku as a nickname from the girl, but he couldn't deny hearing her say it so endearingly made him like it. He found he'd blush and freeze up a lot when talking to her. Not that it really surprised him, he was super awkward around most people, and if they were of the opposite gender, he found himself making a fool of himself. He recalled their conversation after they all introduced themselves properly to each other. "Oh yeah, Midoriya?" Ida spoke up as they passed the entrance. "I've been meaning to ask, just what was that during the ball throw? I was under the impression your quirk was just an enhancement type." "Oh yeah." Uraraka perked her head up. "You caught the ball in that super weird tendril thing. Just what the heck is your quirk?" "Crap, what do I tell them? I barely have any idea myself." "Well, the voice called the power Far Reach, but I can hardly let them know I have multiple powers. If I do, that might raise questions that could expose one for all." The boy thought up what he could say quickly on the spot. Maybe he could admit to multiple powers if he worded it carefully. If he only told them the half-truth, then hopefully that would satiate them. "Well, it's odd." The boy started, attracting both their attention. He showed them the back of his left hand. "My actual quirk is called Mark. This thing here is the namesake." "Oh, that's so cool looking. All my quirk gives me are the pads on my finger," Uraraka exclaimed, showing the boy her fingers. "And you got something like a really cool tattoo?" I can't deny I was concerned that it was a tattoo. While I have no problem with people who wish to put designs on their body, you are nowhere near the age for it to be legal. I could not condone such actions, the tall teen exclaimed. "Crap, if that's Ida's feelings, then I have to warn him about the old excuse I used before I knew what it was, but that's going to raise questions." "Damn it, Izuki, you stuck yourself in this time." "Wait, that's an idea? Well, then I should probably warn you, there was a lot of confusion over this thing a few months ago." Midoriya started examining it, remembering all the stares and mutterings about him there was when it showed up. "You see, I didn't have it until roughly a year ago." "Wait, what? No way. How?" Uraraka questioned, confused as to the lat manifestation. Ida didn't say anything, but the look on his face showed similar wonderment. "Well, you've both seen what happens when I use 100%, right?" It was a rhetorical question, but they both nodded. "Well, what do you think would happen if a 4 or 5-year-old manifests that kind of power?" "It certainly wouldn't be pretty." Ida nodded before properly comprehending his words. "Wait, you don't mean?" "Until a month ago I was considered quirkless by everyone," the boy told them. Both looked at him sadly. "That explains Bakugo calling you quirkless?" Uraraka said quietly. Ida had a finger to his chin, thinking. People are hardly nice to quirkless people nowadays. I'm sorry if you had to put up with that. "Wait, a month ago?" Midoriya swore he could physically see the gears in Ida's brain turning. "Don't tell me the exam was the first time you used your power?" The greenette just nodded. "Saving Uraraka. That was the very first time they ever appeared. I was just as surprised as anyone once I was flying through the air." "Wah!" The brunette shouted in surprise, and Ida looked at him with an equal amount of shock. "No way! That was the first time? But your moves were so amazing, you're trying to tell us that was just luck?" "I guess so," the greenette said nervously, scratching his head. The taller teen walked over to the greenette and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then I seriously must apologize again for how I acted at the exam. It must have took great amounts of courage just to walk into the school to attempt the exam quirkless alone. And to run head-on into the danger like that, just to save another and stay cool under the pressure of powers you had no idea about. Midoriya, I misjudged you severely, and I am immensely sorry for how I acted. I can only hope to one day be as courageous as you," the boy said. Suddenly both boys felt a pair of arms wrap around their necks. "Well, that was super cute," giggled the girl who was currently causing Izuku to turn a shade of red not yet discovered by mankind. So back to what started this, you still haven't told us what that tentacle was, Deku, or what you wanted to warn Ida about. Alright, the boy said, working his way out of the side hug to calm down. Well, you see, yeah, I wasn't really treated the greatest in middle school. A lot of my classmates saw me as some freak to avoid at all costs. I'd gone through too much of my life quirkless to ever consider it could have been one of my own. In fact, I thought it was Mark from a villain and didn't want to give my class any more excuses to hate me, so I pretended it was an accident that occurred when walking past a tattooist. I said that when I was walking past, there was a mishap and the tattooist's Quirk ended up putting the mark on me instead. HMIC, Ida said. Like I said before, I do find lying quite the immoral act normally, but seeing the situation you were in, I can hardly blame you. I'm just glad you are away from those classmates altogether. Yeah. Uraraka pumped a fist into the air. And God forbid it ever happening, but even if you did end up losing your Quirk at any point, I promise I'd still stand by you, Deku. I concur, Quirk or not, you are quite clearly an exceptional student and person. I would stand by you as well, Ida said. Izuku could feel the tears starting but willed them to stay at bay for now. He could cry happy tears on the train. So the tentacle? Right? The greenette said. He told them about the tendrils during the exam and how they morphed into the tentacle. How the exam was the first time he was using it properly. The only change he made was acting as if he was the one to dub it Far Reach because he had a feeling it would be bad to tell them he was hearing voices. So the test was basically the first time I properly used Far Reach, knowing what was going to happen. It didn't show up for so long because it was basically waiting for my body to be ready to actually handle the power. You certainly have a knack for impressive first times, Midoriya, Ida said, not realizing his innuendo. Uraraka burst out laughing heavily while Midoriya turned almost purple in embarrassment. Are you two okay? Did someone activate a Quirk? Midoriya, maybe you should go back to recovery, girl. It's not that, Ida, Uraraka said through her laughs. Replay what you just said in your head. While the girl tried to get the blue-haired boy see what he'd done, Midoriya considered his new power. He wondered how All Might would feel about what he did in the exam. All Might? The greenette's eyes widened. Oh crap, I should have told him about it before I left. The teen turned on the spot and ran back without any warning to the other two. Sorry guys. I forgot I needed to go to the teacher's lounge for something. Hang on, I'll come with you. Uraraka shouted, running after him. Sorry, Ida. As the greenette ran away, he thought he heard the blue-haired teen say something about still not being sure what he said wrong. Midoriya let out a sigh. A massive positive from the previous day was all the training he had managed with Far Reach. He had enough confidence in his traversal skills, as that turned out to be much easier than pulling stuff towards him. Far Reach would latch onto the floor or walls and he would be pulled forward. So long as he accounted for his momentum, he could land with relative ease. Grabbing objects had turned out to be his hardest challenge. Even after he had returned home, he had gotten his mom to help him set up a small lineup of different size objects to try and pull to himself. The smaller an item, the harder it got. He found weight was rarely an issue though. He could grab people as well, and considering the window incident with All Might, the boy felt confident he could pull even someone like Ida off their feet so long as he caught them off guard. He had considered what he could do with his Far Reach at length when he went to bed. After all, sooner or later they would be doing combat training. He had yet to really have a chance to analyze most of his classmates' quirks properly. He had some notes from basic observations, but he needed to refine them as he learnt more. The only people he really had any idea of what to expect from were Ida, Uraraka, and Bakugo. To a lesser extent the blonde French boy as well. Toyoma, was that his name? Considering what One for All did to his body, he knew he would likely be switching to focusing primarily on Far Reach from now on. It was a much safer and perhaps even more versatile power right now. He found out pretty quick though that it was restricted to his left hand. All Might's first class would be in a few hours. He felt pretty excited to see how his mentor dealt with multiple students. He put the thoughts out of his head for now as Todoroki, a bored-looking boy with bi-toned hair, insisted the first sentence of the new question was wrong despite it clearly being number 3. Did he miss something? The question on the board read, "Which of these sentences is wrong?" The man whom I respect most is my father. That is the house in which he lived. I well remember the day on which we both met. Please tell me all that you know. Good. It was strange that someone who got in through recommendations would choose the wrong option. Midoriya finished a sketch of Ida's face in his notebook beside some notes on the taller teen's Quirk as he waited with the rest of his class. It was time. Hero Basic Training Class. He found himself wondering once again what it would be like. He certainly had a better idea than the rest of his classmates what All Might could be like as a teacher, but it was a different type of scenario for teaching. He didn't get long to ponder on it as the door slid open. I am here. A familiar booming voice announced as the muscly man appeared in the doorway, holding onto its supports. Coming through the door like a hero. A wide grin split across the boy's face as he watched his mentor. The rest of the class seemed quite happy as well as shouts of surprise and excitement rang out. One of the girls, Azui the boy thought she was called, pointed out that he was wearing his Silver Age costume. A red, blue, and yellow ensemble. It took all the greenettes' willpower to not externally fanboy. Welcome to the most important class at UA High. Think of it as Hero NG 101. Here you will learn the basics of being a pro and what it means to fight in the name of good. The man started flexing his muscles as he talked, showboating like normal. Midoriya couldn't help the amused thought slipping through the crack. Let's get into it, the blonde exclaimed as he pulled out a card which had battle emblazoned on the front in red font. Today's lesson will pull no punches. Fight training. Kaken growled happily. How someone did that Midoriya was still confused on. Real combat? The pro went on to talk about costumes, pulling out the cases containing the classes. Midoriya only half followed what the man was saying at this point as he was freaking out internally. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Sure, he had gone over some of what he could do with far reach, but to have to implement those ideas so soon, with still only day worth of training? He wasn't sure whether he'd rather end up facing Bakugo or Ida. They were the only ones he had any analysis on, but at the same time, they seemed to be a lot more on the powerful side. The boy shook his head. If he freaked out now, it would get in the way of figuring out what he needed to do. He walked to the front with the rest of class. At least he'd get to try the costume from his mom. Before he could walk out to head the changing rooms though. Young Midoriya. Hang on a moment, the principal wished for me to tell you something. The blonde said. It also attracted the attention of some of his classmates raising their eyebrows in surprise, but All Might shooed them off towards the changing rooms. Is something the matter? The boy asked, confused and slightly concerned. The blonde laughed. Nothing is wrong, my boy. Now, you're smart, so I'm sure you probably realize this yourself, but it would perhaps be for the best if you relied only on far reach for now. The principal agreed that while the origin of it is certainly odd, until there are signs of any truly adverse long-term effects, it would be better to rely on it. Okay, sir. The boy nodded, looking at his hand. Then I guess it's time to see what I can really do. Midoriya cursed his luck as he stared at the building before him, Uraraka at his side. They were doing a training exercise in teams of 2. His team, Team A, had somehow managed to end up having to face Bakugo and Ida, Team D. They were somewhere inside the building, playing the role of villains protecting a faux bomb. Team A had to either recover the weapon or capture the villains. Somehow Izuku doubted they'd win through capture, considering Bakugo's nature. It was a fight against 2 incredibly strong people with 15 years wrath to practice using their quirks, against his 1 day. His saving grace was Uraraka, with her anti-gravity power. So long as they were creative, they could go far together. Unfortunately, every time Midoriya looked at her, he found himself blushing like a madman trying not make eye contact. Why did she have to look so good in that costume? The boy shook his head. Focus. More than anything, he needed to focus on the almost inevitable battle with Kaken. The blonde would not be happy about his sudden quirk and probably still wanted payback for showing him up during the ball throw. You know, you look really odd like that. Uraraka spoke up before flailing about as she realized what she said. Not in a bad way or anything. I just mean the one glove on, one glove off look is... Oh, the boy said, looking down at his arms. His right had a big white glove around it, but his left was free. Well, that because I have no idea if the glove would get in the way of the mark. I told you yesterday about how I'm still new to it. If we're doing combat training, probably better not to risk it. Oh, I get it. The girl nodded with a smile. By the way, I really like your costume, it's super cool. Thanks, ha. The boy said nervously, scratching his head as she looked away, focusing on the building's floor plan they had gotten from All Might. You too. This is nothing special, I just put down the first thing that came to mind really. Wish they hadn't assumed I wanted it skin tight though. The girl said with a light blush. You think they really expect us to memorize this building's floor plan? I mean, it's so big. You know, All Might is just as cool in person as he is on television. Uraraka continued while Midoriya continued considering the millions of ways he was royally screwed walking into this building. I'm glad he's not threatening us with some kind of punishment like Mr. Aizawa. We can relax. You're sweating through your costume. It's just, the boy started nervously but slowly his speech came back to him. It's just, because we're up against Kaken. Plus there's Ida too. We should be on our guard, who knows what they'll pull. Oh right, Bakug? The girl said, a slight disdain creeping into her tone when she said the blonde's name. He's the one who's always making fun of you. And he's amazing. The brunette admitted. He can be royal pain sure, but he also has amazing strength and confidence, his ambition and not to mention his quirk. They're all so much greater than mine. I don't know if I agree with all of that. Uraraka said with a finger to her chin, as if in thought. Your mark is so cool. If I had to choose between it or his explosion I would have choose that. The boy looked up at her in surprise and she smiled back warmly. The boy gave a small smile back and stood up, adjusting the mask to his face. Thank you. Still though, I do think he's so much more amazing, but that just means I have do even better. I refuse to lose today. So it's some fated battle between rivals? The brunette asked with a smile and determined eyes. Oh, not that I'm trying to get you wrapped up in my fight or anything. The boy quickly said, flailing his arms. Are you kidding? We're a team and more importantly, you're my friend. Let's win this for you, Deku. The girl said as her hands tightened into fists and a wide grin split across her face. Uraraka. The boy tailed off, before a grin of his own appeared under his mask. Right? Let's do this. The buzzer went off then, All Might's voice declaring the exercise started. I can get up to that window there with far reach and pull you up as well. The brunette told the girl. I only just learned yesterday I can pull people way over my own weight with it, so getting us both in will be easy and will be a surprise to those two inside. I can also pull objects and use it to travel pretty fast, a bit like a bungee cord I can summon on command. I retain my momentum, if that's important. That's everything I know about my far reach. I'll be relying solely on that, considering what happens when I use my super strength. Sounds like a plan. The girl said, excited to be getting the full scoop on the boy's power. I can float anything so long as it's under 3 tons. If I go over that I get really nauseous fast. Also, floating myself takes way more effort than floating other people or items and makes me nauseous as well, so we should probably avoid any plans that involve floating me. Right? The boy nodded, turning and lifting his left hand up to aim for the window. One last thing. Both Ida and Bakugo will probably really hard to capture considering their quirks and determination. We should focus mainly on trying to recover the weapon. Now let's hurry, we're on a time limit. You ready? He heard a noise of affirmation from behind him, and the boy closed his eyes to take a breath before he leapt into action. While his eyes were shut, however, he felt a sudden gust of powerful wind start blowing over his face, and when he opened his eyes, he found the buildings surrounding the one before had disappeared and the one before him seemed to be in the process of exploding yet frozen. In his surprise from the sudden change of scenery, he moved his hand and accidentally set off his power. The tentacle grabbed onto and threw the boy head first into it before he fell unceremoniously back to the ground. Ah wow. The boy groaned as he slowly sat back up, not registering the ghostly laugh not too far away. This place felt familiar, but as far as he knew he'd never been here before. The sky was an empty gray and the ground beneath him had become solid rock. The rock only stretched a little past any side of the building. The boy then started searching for his teammate and almost screamed when he saw where she had been standing previously. There was now a solid black marble statue with her features on it. The boy ran to it immediately, but before he could say anything the voice spoke up behind him. Your worries are nothing to be concerned about, she is not actually here. Normally I'd only people into the void in their sleep so I could take them to any part of it, but there are some circumstances pertaining to the necessity of this particular visit, though you probably don't remember them. Oh, you're the voice that's been in my head. Midoriya shouted in surprise. The black-eyed man grinned in a way that made him seem really creep. Well, yes I am, but that's not all I've been, the man said before immediately switching subjects, walking towards the building as if to inspect it. Limitations are an interesting thing. A very human thing. As a god, it can be easy to forget about what mortals can't do. Of course, even I have limits. I have of course been watching your progress, as I do so like to observe. But I would not normally get as involved inside your head as I have been. This place, the void, it's so much older and stranger than you will ever be able to comprehend. Older than even me. The man suddenly disappeared in a shower of black crystals and reappeared by the Uraraka statue, placing a hand on top it for support as he looked at Midoriya, causing the boy to shiver. Just who was this guy? Why did his presence feel familiar? It was not always anchored to this world. For a long time its influence remained elsewhere. Due to extreme circumstances I had to find a way to move this place myself. Not an easy task even for someone with my powers. The man took a moment to observe the never-ending distance of the void as he called it. My voice in your head has been a side effect of my plan. You are what is grounding the void to your own world for now, Midoriya, by carrying that mark. I need to keep a closer eye on you than I would most my marked. So that's where this came from? The boy thought in surprise. Without warning, in that moment a rush of memories swarmed his mind and he clutched his head. It was not a pleasant experience. But now, he remembered everything. Outsider, wait, hang on. If you moved here from a different world, then why did you act like you were always here when we first met? The blocks disappeared then. The man mused. He teleported one last time, appearing before the boy. Would you really have believed I was a god if I said I simply wasn't from here before? Perhaps a bit manipulative, but you understand I needed to give my mark to someone and I would prefer it be someone interesting such as you. As for my voice in your head, spending so long alone in this place, you start holding conversations with yourself to pass the time. This led me to the habit of speaking aloud. That's what the passing comments in your head have been. I guided you with your initial power, due to the odd nature of its manifestation compared to others who have bared my mark, but it's certainly not quite as fun giving you answers, of course. So after this visit, the rest of your powers you must figure out on your own, maybe with some limited hints depending on how I feel. The black-eyed man looked behind himself. Life is nothing but choices, big and small. While the one you make today certainly isn't as interesting as some others I've seen, it will say something about you. Beat the villains or silently recover the weapon and ensure the safety of it. This is the first choice, and I can assure it won't be the last. The boy felt a pressure on his body as the world of the void slowly dissipated around him. One last thing, be careful you don't go overboard, it could be really bad for your eyes. Midoriya cringed as his Uraraka's footsteps reverberated off the walls. Neither of their costumes were designed with stealth in mind. The green and pink colors would stand out like sore thumbs against the building's harsh grays. His shoes at least weren't hard to mask thanks to the rubber soles, but Uraraka's stabilizers were made of solid plastic, so she was much louder. After his frustratingly vague and mostly one-sided conversation, he had started looking at this exercise from an angle other than pure combat. Why risk a fight with two people who would be so much better at fighting when they could sneak past entirely? The dark long halls could be an advantage at a distance were it not for the brightness of their costumes. The halls were narrow and long, there were no ledges he could use for a higher vantage. Careful, there's a lot of blind spots. The greenette half-whispered back to his teammate. He stared up at the roof and the length of the hallway. If he was going to figure out how he could use far reach in this environment safely, he'd have to do it now. Hang on, I'm going to try something. Be ready in case it ends up being too loud if I mess up. Okay, the girl said with a firm nod as the boy aimed his left hand towards the roof. He could feel different amounts of pressure in his hand depending on if he'd be able to reach or not. He'd found out yesterday. Using the pressure, he had learned how to visualize a kind of marker, and right now that marker couldn't reach quite up to the roof, however it was close. He could use the wall. Let's try this. The feeling of his hand being wrapped around in tendrils that was quickly becoming familiar to him, he felt yet again, and he watched as the purple tentacle shot out fast, latching onto the wall before he felt the sensation of being pulled off his feet into the air. It took less than a second to cross the entire hall. He heard Uraraka whisper shout something that sounded like nice. He motioned to the girl to join him, and after waiting for a moment she was beside him again. It was good to know he had a way to get around quickly if need be then. If we do run into Kaken, what can we do to escape? I still have basically no control over One for All, so a head-to-head fight could be suicide, and even if I did try a 100% smash it could kill someone. I have to rely on Uraraka's zero gravity and what I know about far reach and the notes I've spent so long collecting. If I could get Kaken off his feet for just a moment and Uraraka floated him, no, that wouldn't work. He'd still be able to move about with his explosions, damn it. Maybe if I could reach higher ground just for a moment without him seeing me, I could use the momentum from the fall to knock him out? Seems too risky, so I guess not. What about if dash? The greenette didn't get more time to consider how to proceed as Bakugo flew out from the corner, turning in the air aiming for both of them. The greenette reacted on instinct, dodging and jumping towards Uraraka, pulling her towards the ground with him. Uraraka, you okay? I'm fine, thanks, the girl said, coughing slightly from the sudden smoke. Midoriya scowled as it cleared, showing the crater in the wall left by Bakugo's attack. The blonde boy barely even looked fazed. The right side of the greenette's face had been exposed in the fight. Deku, it's just a mask, the boy assured her. Damn it, I still don't have a plan yet. I knew you'd come at me first, you'd try to catch me by surprise. You want payback for the ball throw. The greenette explained why he was unfazed. Unfortunately, Bakugo wasn't someone he could keep distracted by talking, as the blonde started charging at him. Look out for his right hook. I won't hurt you so bad they have to end the fight. Just close, the blonde exclaimed with a malicious grin, pulling his right arm back and throwing a punch. Now, without another thought, the shorter of the two boys rushed forward, wrapping the explosive boy in an awkward hug. One of his arms wrapped around the blonde's gauntlet while the other wrapped around his chest. He could feel the momentum still from the blonde's charge as he started to pull up over his own head as he turned around. The greenette let out a shout. Physical enhancements or not, Kaken was heavy. The boy watched as the blonde smashed into the ground on his back, briefly bouncing back into the air. The blonde didn't make any quick moves to get back up. Kaken, the greenette breathed out as the blonde slowly started to rise. You always use a big right hook to start a fight. I know because I've watched you for years. I analyzed every amazing hero, even you. I wanted to learn everything I could about them, even if I had no way of replicating them because I needed to know to survive. It was all in the notebook you burned and threw away. But you know what? I like Deku, it's like I can do it. I think it would make a great hero name. You can call me Deku, but I'm not the same helpless, defenseless kid anymore. You hear me? From now on, Deku is the name of a hero, the greenette shouted, as his emotions got the better of him for a moment. Out the corner of the boy's vision, he could see Uraraka's eyes widen in surprise behind her visor. However, he had to focus on the blonde, as he had finally gotten back on his feet and was glaring daggers at him. The greenette cursed how his body was shaking, giving away how he really felt. The boy growled as he hunched over, his hands making claws as the palms started to glow and some sparks started igniting. You're shaking in your boots, you're so scared. But you want to fight me anyway, that's why I hate you. The greenette didn't have time to reply as he suddenly put a finger to his ear, his look of hatred briefly morphing into one of annoyance. Just shut up and defend the weapon. I've got more important things to worry about. The blonde continued to angrily yell into the earpiece, apparently getting into an argument with Ida. Midoriya took his chance while they argued to pull out the capture All Might had given him before the exercise from his pouch. I still don't have much of a plan, but I can't let that stop me now. The greenette didn't have any more time to think as the blonde threw a hand behind him and rocketed towards the boy using his quirk, his leg prepared for a kick. Uraraka. Go. Time seemed to slow as the blonde rocketed towards him. The smaller boy threw up his arm up to block the incoming kick, while letting the capture tap unravel while falling through the air, catching it with his other hand. Now, all the move. Think you can take me alone? The explosive boy asked snidely. The greenette, however, didn't answer, instead focusing on the blonde's attacks. He had started wrapping the capture tape around the blonde's leg when he finally noticed. Hero Notebook number 10, page 18, Eraserhead. Luckily I got to see his moves in action. What will Kakin do now? Knowing him, he'll be impatient and try another big punch. Just like the boy thought, the explosive teen went for a punch. The greenette dodged, rolling across the ground as he heard the wall behind where he had just been standing explode. I was right. He's not pulling any punches, not that I expected any less. As the greenette panted, he continued to analyze the blonde. He kicked first this time. He's switching things up so I can't predict his moves. Does that mean he's worried? The blonde's hand shot behind him, ready to propel him. Midoriya scowled and ran off down the hallway. He was beside, trying to create some distance. He's completely focused on me, so Uraraka is free to find Ida. I need to stay away for now until I can come up with a plan to beat Kakin. Get back here, Deku. He heard the blonde shout in surprise and anger. He didn't hear an explosions though. Did his sudden retreat catch the boy off guard? The marked boy shook his head. It didn't matter why. He just had to be thankful Kakin didn't, because it put him at an advantage. The greenette shot his left arm forward without aiming so he could increase the distance between the two faster. I can't risk any more close-range encounters. I need to figure out a plan. Think, is there anything you don't know about explosion? The greenette saw his opportunity as he entered a maze of hallways, disappearing into the one and continuing to run. He could hear the explosions behind him as Bakugo followed, but now they echoed and he had no idea if they were close or far because of the acoustics of where he chose. Crap, that's not good. As the boy hid in the corner of one of the halls, he heard the blondes shout. Damn it. You were tricking me for years by acting weak. Bet you've been laughing behind my back? Where's that flashy power of yours now? Let's see how it compares to mine. Quirk or no, you'll never beat me. The greenette flinched and clutched the wall slightly, a wave of guilt washing over him. Kakin. Then the boy's eyes widened in surprise as he realized what he had been stupidly forgetting, his advantage over the blonde. Dang it. I've been focusing so much on Bakugo's quirk and what I know about it. I should be focusing on what he doesn't know about mine. Finally, the boy had a plan. He flinched as he heard an explosion and a loud clattering. Did he just blow a door in? Again the greenette cursed his luck as the blonde's footsteps reverberated throughout the whole hall. Why did he have to pick the one place where he couldn't tell how close the blonde was? The greenette let out an almost inaudible growl. Damn it, if I just knew where he was I could start putting my plan into motion. The boy unclenched his left hand from a fist and waved it around, mostly trying to remove the heat he was experiencing in his hero costume. Wishing he could see through walls instead of having super strength, he couldn't use cause of what would happen to his bones. The greenette blinked. When he opened his eyes, he was in for a major surprise. What the? His vision now had a sepia-like tone, the black walls now looking a light beige instead. He fell backward, surprise, accidentally colliding with the wall, making a relatively loud thud. The boy turned, worried he had alerted the nearby blonde, but to his surprise, instead of seeing an angry Kakin flying through the air, all he saw was 3 traveling white lines that seemed to be fading. When the sound finally stopped, the lines dissipated. Was that? The greenette tapped the wall lightly, seeing much smaller but similar lines moving around, once again disappearing as the sound stopped. I can see sound? As it turned out, that was not all the boy could see, as in the hall just beyond his normal vision suddenly a big yellow human-shaped blob appeared. It had 2 tiny white pinpricks near the top and a white cone of light seemed to beam out of them. However, what caught the boy's attention was the 2 massive round shapes near where the hands would be. Wait, is that Kakin? The boy got his confirmation as the blonde called out, sounding extremely close even despite the reverb. Come out now, Deku, and maybe I'll go easy on you. Recalling his moment of wishing he could see through the wall, the boy almost gave away his position by shouting in surprise as he realized what happened. Okay, calm down, it's just another power, not the end of the world. Not normal, but neither was far reach, and you figured that out well enough. Well, okay, technically you freaked out until the outsider gave you some indication to what it was and still continued being freaked out, but tomato. Is it from the mark or one for all though, this power? Finally, the Greenette recalled the words of the outsider during his visit. So, after this visit, the rest of your powers you must figure out on your own. The boy wanted to slap himself. He should have realized then and there that something was going to happen. He had been distracted by the pain in his head of his memories coming back and focusing on the fight, but he still should have picked up on that. He was an idiot. The marked boy shook his head. Whether he should have realized or not, it was happening now. He had unlocked a new power, one that could be much safer to figure out in the midst of battle than far reach. He saw the yellow silhouette of Kakin getting close. With this power, I can implement my plan even more effectively than before. The glow stopped and his vision returned to normal, causing the boy to look around in shock. A time limit? Okay, I can still use this. Kakin will be here any minute now, so be quick. Once you do this, what do you know? I can't go after the weapon with Kakin following me. If I bring him back to Uraraka, we'd run out of time before we beat him. But there's a way, where we barely need to fight at all, so long as I'm smart about this. Finally, the boy started to walk out. Just before he rounded, he had one last thought. Kakin, every last thing I've said about not trying to compete with you, I take it all back. The Greenette stepped out calmly, making no move to make any attacks or get closer. Were you being serious about going easier on me? You're right. Now I am going to kill you. The blonde yelled in his usual angry tone. Midoriya couldn't help it, he smiled. That's what I thought. The boy replied, summoning his far reach and throwing it right at Bakugo. He knows next to nothing about far reach, so he shouldn't be keen to let it hit him. Which means, much like the Greenette was expecting, the blonde's eyes widened in surprise and he set off a massive explosion at the appendage, trying to destroy it, creating a massive black smokescreen around himself. At that same moment, Midoriya let the massive tentacle disappear and waved his hand, trying to summon the power from before, trying to replicate his emotions and gestures. Come on, let me see through walls or whatever got you to activate. In an instant, like a pulsing wave, he saw everything change in color, the sepia tones returning and Bakugo's yellow silhouette shined through the smoke. The Greenette grinned and immediately lifted his hand up, aiming higher up the walls and firing off far reach. I don't have time to be glad about my powers working, I need to keep moving. As the Greenette soared through the air, he kept an eye on the blonde beneath him, the white pinpricks and cone following him. Are those his eyes? The cone's smaller than before, which would make sense if that's his field of vision. He can't see exactly what's happening, he's only seeing the movement of the smoke and my shadow among it. As the Greenette landed, he took off in a sprint. He looked back to see the smoke clearing. Kakin was looking right at him, royally pissed off. You fucker, get back here, coward. The Greenette rounded the corner and immediately fired off far reach again while the blonde couldn't see him. I need to make sure Kakin doesn't see me traveling using far reach at all. If he does, then we're screwed. We're on the 3rd floor from the map All Might gave us, just around. This next corner there should be a massive empty room. Deku, I found the bomb on the 4th floor. He suddenly heard Uraraka in his ear panicking, causing him to flinch. But Ida found me. Crap. Midoriya cursed. If Uraraka was captured, he'd lose a massive ally. His plan, while still possible without her, would be a lot less likely to succeed if anything went wrong after she was caught. From the boy's mental count, there were only 7 minutes left of the match. Don't focus on the weapon, just don't get caught for now. I have a plan, but I need a little more time. Stay calm. The boy let go off the earpiece as he finally saw the room he was looking for, with Bakugo a sizable distance behind him. As the boy rushed in, he slammed the door shut behind him, loud enough to attract Bakugo. The boy looked up and saw, much to his relief, that there were metal bars holding the roof together. Activating far reach once more, he scaled up the bars and waited. It didn't take long for the blonde to arrive. However, he didn't explode the door open like he did others, and he rushed in and closed the door behind him calmly with a malicious grin. Stupid move, Deku, now you're trapped in here with me and only one exit. You aren't going to get away from me again. The greenette fired off his far reach, deliberately shooting it slightly to the side of Bakugo, getting his attention. The blonde looked up and smirked, an evil glint in his eyes. You missed. In an instant, an explosion happened under the blonde and he was airborne, not too far from Midoriya. He flew across the air and Midoriya took his chance. The blonde would expect a Quirk retaliation, which meant he had to choose a different route. The greenette leaped into the air towards the blonde, causing said boy to widen his eyes in surprise as the greenette started to fall towards him, delivering a swift kick that the blonde blocked. When he blocked, however, he stopped making explosions, throwing him off balance, and the two fell. Midoriya grabbed onto the bars while the blonde stopped his fall by setting two explosions off. The greenette didn't allow the blonde to regain his bearings, firing off far reach yet again, this time aiming to make sure the tendril grabbed this time. Before it was able to connect, though, the blonde fired off an explosion, throwing him away from the tentacle. The greenette, however, was unfazed. He hadn't let the power dissipate this time and swung it around towards the blonde like a whip. The blonde had to set of multiple explosions, firing him all around the room, dodging the tendril before flying straight towards the boy controlling it. Just die already. The power dissipated at last and Midoriya stepped off his perch, allowing himself to fall through the air. The blonde followed after him, rocketing towards the boy, getting closer and closer until, "Now you're fucked." The blonde practically screamed with a manic grin and insane look in his eyes. The greenette did his best to ignore it as he raised his left hand once more, his power surging forth and wrapping around the blonde. As the two fell, Midoriya put all his strength into twisting the two around in the air, hurling the blonde down into the ground. As he continued to fall, he aimed and landed with both feet going into the blonde's stomach before jumping back and rolling away. As the greenette stood, he watched the blonde get up slowly, slower than usual. He must have been winded with that last attack. The blonde just seemed to stare for a moment, but then his gauntlet glowed, attracting both boys' attention. The blonde smirked while the greenette looked on curious. The blonde lifted his fist. "I'm all loaded up." "What does that mean?" the smaller boy asked, though he had a fairly good idea. He wasn't sure whether it was a massive problem or an unforeseen blessing. "Why haven't you come at me at 100% yet? You haven't shown that strength you did in the tests." The blonde's eyes seemed to shrink to pinpricks as a haunting smile graced his features. "Don't tell me you're underestimating me, Deku. Why don't you man up and show me what you're really made of?" "Kaken," the greenette started, his eyes hardening into a determined stare. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The blonde's smile quickly morphed into an angry frown before lifting back again into a smiling. The explosive teen aimed his hand with the gauntlet that had glowed before at him. "Since you're such a damn stalker, you probably know by now how my Quirk explosion works. How it's my sweat causing the explosions. And this gauntlet has been storing it all up for one big blast. None of your stupid notes or that fucking tentacle can stop it." Both the boys could hear all might in their ears as Bakugo prepared to fire it at him. "Don't, young Bakugo. You'll kill him. He'll be fine as long as he dodges," the blonde said back. Seeing he was not going to back down, Midoriya felt panic rising. He had to make a choice now. Either he dodged like the blonde said, which is what he wanted, or... The greenette summoned far reach and swung it out way to the side of the blonde, swinging it towards the blonde full force much to his surprise. That blast isn't going off at all. It was a bluff, baiting the blonde. He knew he didn't have the power to do anything to that blast if it fired, but Bakugo didn't. The explosive boy swung his gauntlet around towards the incoming tentacle. "I'm getting rid of this stupid fucking thing for good." Finally the blast fired, the tentacle flailing way back before dissipating. The blast didn't care and continued to destroy the wall on the other side of the room, kicking up a massive black cloud surrounding the two boys. Finally, now's my chance. His placement hadn't been random when he had landed. He had purposefully kept lined up with the door, just slightly to the side. Now he got lined up while the blonde was still reeling and blinded from his own blast. Far reach flew through the air, wrapping around the handle of the door and yanking it open hard, causing a bang. The tentacle dissipated once more and Midoriya silently took cover behind a nearby pillar that had survived the blast. The small boy activated his vision power for the final time. He could see the explosive teen recovering and sprinting to the door. He took the bait. "Get back here, dude, we're not done." The greenette let out a sigh and made sure to wait a few moments. He had been lucky. The room he chose was just underneath the room with the bomb. He could see two yellow silhouettes above, one smaller one barely avoiding a larger and much faster one. Listening to the blonde's footsteps disappear along with his yellow silhouette. Probably only 4 or 5 minutes left. I need get to Uraraka and Ida now. The greenette got up and rushed to the window leading outside. The whole reason he had come here was to get the blonde off his trail and escape out the window. Now he knew which floor and even better which room he could use the outside of the building to climb. With Bakugo on a fruitless search for him, he opened the window and climbed out, looking for the windows he could climb in. When he saw the ledges, he realized he'd have to jump and turn in the air. The greenette looked to see the drop. It wasn't deadly, but it would hurt, okay? Don't panic. If you can lift All Might's body weight, you can do this? Midoriya pushed off the building and jumped, turning like he planned and trying to fire far reach. This time, however, the tentacle didn't come, leaving him to plunge to the ground. Crap, what? The boy then realized how much he'd actually kept the tentacle manifested in that fight. He was tired from it, so his body wasn't letting it activate. Crap. What the hell do I do? The boy recalled the plan he had come up with at the exam and how Bakugo had avoided colliding with the ground in their fight. He remembered All Might telling him how One for All was more powerful in him than it should be. He wasn't at risk of dying here, so he just had to give it a shot. The greenette put his fingers together on his left hand and aimed at the ground, summoning One for All into his finger. He flicked his finger and the ground beneath him suddenly exploded from the pressure, rocketing him back up the way. He didn't feel the pain in his finger and stole a quick look, seeing it uninjured. Recovery Girl's theory was right then. I better use this while I still can. The boy aimed another flick at the window he had been intending to climb up to before, sending another smash at it. The wall caved in and he could see Ida and Uraraka look back in shock. Ida in the midst of rushing at the heroine in training. Midoriya aimed one final flick behind him, angling it so it propelled him right towards the room. In no time at all he was rolling across the floor and into an upright position. Ida was still moving in to attack Uraraka, unable to alter his course. Perfect! Hurricane! The boy shouted, flinging his left hand forwards and summoning Far Reach. Now he knew he had reached his limit. He could force it to appear anyway, but it hurt. The fingers in his hands finally breaking didn't help. The tentacle flew through the air and wrapped around the tall boy's leg. Jump! The greenette yanked back hard as the girl did what he said. The engine Quirk wielder fell over into the ground, his engine still running, sending him right into the wall on the other side of the room. The gravity girl was floating in the air towards the weapon. She must have used her quirk during the jump. As she touched it, a loud explosion sounded behind Midoriya. Came the unmistakable screech of Bakugo, but before the blonde could get close enough to do anything, All Might's voice was heard over the radio. The hero team wins. The 4 teens froze. Uraraka sat down to take a breather with a look of relief on her face. Ida sat against the wall he had smashed into, feeling defeated but also happy that it was the good guys who prevailed. Bakugo seethed in rage, sparks igniting from his hand. However, Midoriya just felt tired and nothing else. In fact, a nap sounded great right about. And with that final thought, Midoriya passed out. Midoriya groaned as his eyes slowly fluttered open and he took in his surroundings. Looking around, he saw the familiar interior of the school infirmary and he could hear All Might's voice not too far away. Ease ended up here again. The exhausted teen only heard the end of the number 1 hero's sentence. As the boy slowly rose up from his bed, he saw the skinny form of his mentor talking to Recovery Girl, who looked ticked off. All Might? Recovery Girl? The boy asked, his voice sounding as tired as he felt. The 2 heroes looked over, clearly surprised. You're awake, the blonde said, walking over and taking a seat beside the bed the greenette was in. Recovery Girl had also gotten up and was checking some equipment around him. How are you feeling? Honestly, really tired. What happened? Last thing I remember I was fighting Kakin in that big room. The boy said, clutching his head which felt as if it was throbbing lightly. Did he have a headache? You don't remember? Midoriya just shook his head at the question and immediately regretted it, hissing slightly. Whoa, hey, take it easy. We still don't really know what happened. I have a pretty darn good idea though. Recovery Girl muttered, discontented. You had better tell him what happened, All Might, instead of risking putting more strain on him. And so the blonde did, explaining every detail of the small boy's stunt he had pulled. When he finished, a wide smile formed on the skinny man's face. While the finger flicks were a bit more on the insane side, I want you to know I'm proud of you, young Midoriya. Had your far reach not failed, you perhaps would have won without Ida aware of your presence at all. Your fight with Bakugo embodied the most important part of any fight, avoiding one. Had it not been for me helping you learn how to train far reach, I would have thought you'd had it for years. The greenette smiled slightly while the nurse stood up on a chair to be eye level with him. I certainly can't say I'm happy you're a regular patient, but I suppose in that particular situation it couldn't be helped. For the love of quirks, though, please be more careful from now on. Sorry, Recovery. The boy cut himself off with a shout of pain as he accidentally tapped his finger against the metal bar of his bed. Looking down, he saw it bandaged, but it still felt sore. Not as bad as the previous times he remembered hurt himself, but was still sore. What did I just say? I wasn't able to heal your body, and still can't yet if you're tired. I know you used your power enough that your body tired out and stopped your power working. That plus your reckless plan using one for all, and it's no wonder you passed out. The smaller heroine chided him. All Might put his hand to his chin as if in thought. I'm not so sure about that. I saw your limits in that warehouse. You passed out way too quickly for it to just be tiredness from using far reach too much. Did anything happen in there I might not have seen? The greenette sighed, resting his head against the wall behind him before his eyes shot open wide. Crap. I know what I did wrong. All Might? The greenette started, lifting his left hand and looking at it. Do you remember how you thought it was a quirk? The mark? It is a quirk? Didn't we already agree about that? The blonde asked, confused before suddenly coughing up blood. Wait, don't tell me you think it's something different? Recovery Girl looked on intrigued. Midoriya shook his head. Okay, I won't tell you I think it's not a quirk because I know it's not a quirk. Well, this sounds like there's a story to it. Recovery Girl thought aloud. The small boy cringed slightly and tried not to fidget with his bad finger as he looked up at All Might. Promise you won't freak out until I'm finished at least? The greenette pleaded. All Might's gaze hardened, but he nodded slightly. It was back during the day we first met, just before you saved me from that slime villain. And so the boy regaled the tale of his visit from the black-eyed man, how he called himself a god named the Outsider and offered the boy powers. How the boy thought that it was his only option unless he wanted to die, and how the god had removed his memories until just earlier that day. Finally, he told the two heroes about his discovery of his new power in the middle of the exercise and how the Outsider had given him a vague warning about not overdoing it lest he hurt his eyes. You have another power? All Might asked, surprised before chuckling despite the situation. Holy crap, kid, you're never satisfied, are ya? That's quite the story. The healing heroine finished the skinny man's thought for him. Midoriya just sighed and looked away. I get it if you don't believe me, Dash. No, I do. The blonde quickly assured him. I've genuinely heard weirder, not by much, but I have. I know you're not one to lie about this kind of thing. Still, that someone can grant powers like that? The greenette looked up. All Might almost seemed reminiscent, though not of any fond memories. I have no idea what kind of drain that vision power could have. That's probably why when I combined it with the overuse far reach and one for all I passed out. He never told me of any limit to the powers I might unlock, the Outsider I mean. For all I know, 20 more could be on the way. This new one is easy to hide, but new ones could be a lot harder, and if I have no idea of what will activate them the first time, how do I hide them? Don't, the blonde answered without hesitation, causing the green-eyed boy to look up shocked. If the powers are coming from the mark, then there's not really any exposure risk. In fact, it would probably lower the risk. Your classmates might get a little jealous, but well, you're a unique case now. I'll go talk with the principal and Aizawa as soon as I'm done here. Thank you. Midoriya said before hearing a tutang come from Recovery Girl. It's a darn good thing you'll have more powers, then I won't need to worry about you being a regular here. She said. Now you get back to sleep, you still need rest. All Might, you had best go see Nizu and Aizawa right away. I think they're both in the principal's office. Right? All Might bowed slightly then turned to Midoriya. I'll see you later, young Midoriya. Bye, All Might. The boy replied before setting his head down on his pillow as he heard the door to the infirmary open and close. He would have tried to wander around a bit first, but he had a feeling Recovery Girl would be pretty unhappy with him if he did. It didn't take long for his eyes to start feeling heavy. Before long the boy drifted off, dreaming about spending a day out with Ida and Uraraka. Midoriya yawned as he wandered down the hall to his classroom as he thought about what the nurse had told him before he was dismissed. The boy had woken up late in the afternoon and had still felt exhausted, though he certainly had more energy than last time he woke up. You're still far too tired for my quirk to be safe to use. Don't put too much strain on that finger for the rest of the day. I recommend going straight to bed once you get home. On the bright side, it's healing faster than expected. Maybe that's another thing that mark of yours does, would explain why you're still so tired. Recovery Girl told him as she gently bandaged his finger. You think so? The boy asked, surprised at the observation. It's possible, and if it's true, then you won't be able to use my quirk when you really hurt yourself. Now you be careful. I don't want to see you in here for the rest of the week, the nurse said, shooing him out the room. The greenette sighed as he saw his classroom come into sight. I missed all my afternoon classes. Mr. Aizawa is probably going to choke me with my scarf. At least my memory came back in my sleep. The boy stifled another yawn as he opened the door. When he walked in, he seemed to attract everyone's attention. Hey, it's Midoriya, one red-headed teen called out before a crowd suddenly surrounded him. Good to see you back, Sneaky. I have no idea what you were saying in that match, but you were amazing to watch. I didn't think it was possible to make retreating look so cool. I can't believe you held your own against Bakugo when you did have to fight. That dude's as strong as you are smart. A boy with jet black hair said. Those dodges were amazing. That tentacle is so cool. A girl with curly pink hair and pink skin exclaimed. You guys really set the bar high in your round, so we all made sure to do our best as well. A bulkier boy with tan skin and brown hair said. You weren't the most elegant Budash. Seriously, what is that tentacle? It seems so useful. A blonde boy in one of the front desk had started to speak, but the pink girl had cut over him. All the greenette could do was look between everyone in shock as he felt a light blush come on. He wasn't used to getting this much praise. Hey, I'm Ijiro Kirishima. The red-haired boy introduced himself before pointing to the black-haired boy behind him. We've been going over training results while you were in the infirmary. Hey, I'm Hantasiro. Seriously, well done on that fight. The black-haired boy said with a massive grin. More importantly, I'm Yuga Ao-. I'm Mina Ishido. And I just gotta say your dodging and misdirection was so awesome. Once again the blonde boy had started to speak before the pink girl had interrupted, flailing her arms about. Tsuyu Ajui, but please call me Tsu. Another girl peered out from behind the pink one. She was a normal color and had green hair, just a few shades darker than Midoriya's own. Hey Satu. The bulky teen in the back said. Hey guys? The greenette said, unsure of what to say to all the sudden attention. Another boy with purple ball-like hair who was probably only as tall as Midoriya's knee jumped out in front of him, catching them all off guard. And I'm Mineta, he exclaimed. Whoa, where'd you come from? Everyone broke down into conversation while not too far away Ida tired, and failed, to scold a boy with a bird head apparently called Tokoyami for sitting on a desk. Ida never relaxes, huh? Do you say we grab a bite sometime? Whatcha like? A male voice came from the other side of the classroom. Looking over, Midoriya saw a boy with blonde hair that had a black streak through it. With him was Uraraka. Anything sweet, Deku? The girl immediately cut herself off. Once she noticed the boy, she rushed over with a look of concern on her face. Are you okay? You really scared me when you just passed out like that. I'm sorry for scaring you, Uraraka. The boy apologized before he remembered the end of the exercise. Oh, and sorry for calling you that name in the exercise. I just thought I had to shorten the sentence as much as possible with how fast Ida moves. Nah, it's okay. I actually like it, it's cute, she said, closing her eyes and tilting her head to the side with a smile. Midoriya tried his hardest not to let his blush show when his brain betrayed him and supplied the thought, like you. And you let me call you Deku, so it's only fair. That did get the greenette to blush, and he really had to fight back his urge to flail his arms around like he normally did considering what he was supposed to not put too much pressure on his finger. So why didn't she heal your finger? Uriken asked. Well, that's gonna take some getting used to. Well, it has to do with my stamina. It could kill me if I'm too tired when she uses her quirk. Midoriya explained. Everyone around him seemed surprised at that. As it is, I'm honestly still super tired. It takes a lot out of me to keep far reach active like I did in that fight. Oh, is that why it failed when you tried to climb outside the building? We saw that mark of yours light up, but nothing happened. Kirishima asked, and the boy nodded before looking around. He couldn't see Kaken anywhere in the room. Hey, where's Kaken? He asked, continuing to survey the room in case he just didn't see him. Bakugo? He left a few minutes before you showed up. He seems really angry. He's probably near the gate by now. Mina told him. Midoriya's eyes widened and he turned around. I'll be back. The boy called behind him as he ran off. The blonde's words from earlier in the day played over in his mind. Damn it, you were tricking me for years. Bet you've been laughing behind my back. Where's that flash power of yours now? He hopped one of the last flights of stairs and ran out the door into the long stretch of path was between the gate and the school. Just ahead he could see the explosive teen stalking towards the gate with his hands in his pockets. Kaken! Wait up! The blonde froze, and almost looked as if he was shaking. He slowly turned around with a glare that could kill and growled out, What? The greenette flinched slightly but held his ground. He needed to tell the blonde the truth behind his powers, or at least most of them. I need to tell you something. I know you hate me, but please just listen for a couple minutes. Why the hell should I? Bakugo turned around still glaring and set off a few small explosions in my hands. After everything you've tricked me about, why should I listen to a damn war dash? I didn't trick you. The greenette bit out, interrupting the explosive boy. Now he was really starting to look pissed off, but Midoriya stood his ground, raising his marked hand to show it to the blonde. Look at my left hand, Kaken. The blonde didn't say anything, just grunted discontentedly, but he complied. The smaller boy started summoning Far Reach but didn't let the tendril actually escape, as he didn't know what it would do to his finger. Still he managed what he wanted to do as the mark glowed blue in response. What the? You were there when it first showed up, Kaken, when I first found out about the mark. You know I was just as confused as you, the greenette said before staring into the ground. I had no idea until recently that it was a quirk, and I mean really recently. I only found out during the exam. I wasn't trying to trick anyone. Do you really think I'd hide finally having a quirk from all our classmates when it could have stopped them bullying me? The blonde growled as more explosions set off, but he made no move to do anything. Really, you damn nerd? You wouldn't hide it? Then why the hell do you keep looking down on me, damn it? Why the hell didn't you actually try in the damn exercise? Why didn't you come at me at 100%? That's what you think? Midoriya asked as he looked up, meeting the harsh gaze of the explosive boy with a glare of his own, still holding out his hand. You idiot! Look at my finger! That's what happens if I use 100%, I can't control the power output of my strength yet. I wasn't going to use it at all, but then Far Reach failed and I was gonna smash into the ground. I know you're better than me, I can't beat you in a head-to-head fight. I did come at you at my strongest, the strongest I can do right now. The blonde let off another explosion. He seemed at a loss for words. You're amazing, that's why I wanted to beat you, but I'd never be able to, you're too strong. That's why, I'm gonna learn to control this power, then I'm going to beat you for good. Midoriya said as he clenched his good hand into a fist before his eyes widened. Crap, where did that come from? I just meant to show him I wasn't tricking him. Damn it, I'll never let you get fucking close to that point, you bastard. Bakugo suddenly exploded in rage, but in his eyes there was a hint of fear, as if he was worried about something. Damn it. You already made a fucking fool out of me in that training exercise. So, did you come here to rub it in? I lost, and to make matters worse it was to you. I may have come in first in the exam, but that's not enough. You aren't the only one, damn it. When I was watching that ice guy, I realized I couldn't beat him in a head-to-head fight. Crap, I even agreed with what that girl said. My attack was so stupid. Midoriya had completely lost track of what the Eki was talking about at that point. I guess he means Todoroki when he says ice guy, but which girl is he on about? Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. Enjoy that fucking win, Deku. I swear it'll be the last you ever get. The blonde screamed at him. I'm just getting started. Got that? I'm going to end up the #1 no matter what. The explosive boy had teared up at some point in his rant. He wiped away the tears as he turned and walked away. I won't let you beat me again, you bastard. Don't even try. The greenette watched him walk away for a couple of moments before he let out a sigh of relief. Why does dealing with Kaken have to be so scary and stressful? There you are. A familiar booming voice sounded out. A strong gust of wind almost knocked the smaller boy over before he saw the towering muscle form of All Might holding Bakugo by the shoulders. Bakugo, I found you. Just so you know, pride is an important attribute to have, but while you certainly have the abilities to become a pro hero, there's still plenty you have to learn. Let go of me, All Might. Right now, the boy growled before looking back at the pro. Save your speeches. I'll be more famous than you, and I'll do it without your help. Right? The man let go of the teen, clearly at a loss for words. The greenette ran to his mentor's side as Bakugo walked off. Kaken's fuse has been lit now. There's a raging fire in him, but that doesn't change what I have to do. I'll keep chasing after him, and one day, I'll beat him. Midoriya, what were you saying to Bakugo before I arrived so heroically? The blonde inquired. The boy looked up at him before looking to his mark. During the exercise, he thought I was tricking him. That I'd been hiding my power for years. I felt guilty, so I wanted to set the record straight, the boy explained, and the blonde nodded. Understandable. It's good that even despite your adversity you are willing to accommodate his feelings. The muscular blonde said with a tone of approval. Oh, by the way, tomorrow just before lunch Aizawa will come to collect you from your class. He'll take you to one of the gyms. We'll need to test your new power first so we have the proper idea as to how we should approach this development. Right? Midoriya nodded his head as the two went back inside. All Might took off in the direction of the teacher's lounge, leaving the boy alone. He was about to return to class, but first, I know you're still there. The boy spoke up, looking around the empty room. If you're not going to tell me how my powers work, fine, but you could at least tell me the names of the powers. Yes, I suppose that much I can do. The voice of the outsider spoke inside his head, causing him to shudder. He didn't think he'd ever get used to that. I believe the two who had this power before called it dark vision. Quite a dramatic name, though I wonder if it was really the best one. Dark vision. Midoriya smiled slightly as he walked back to his class. Honestly, he liked the name. Midoriya took a moment to catch his breath after he ran into the school building. A massive swarm of reporters had appeared outside the gate, and he had been almost unable to make it past. He had been asked so many questions about All Might being a teacher that it was practically all he could hear in his head now. Midoriya? He heard a gruff voice in front of him. Looking up, he saw Aizawa staring at him, one eyebrow quirked up as if questioning him. Why are you out of breath? There's a lot of reporters outside trying to find out about All Might. The boy explained, standing up straight. It's almost impossible to get past them just to get in. The scruffy, tired teacher groaned as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Get to class, Midoriya. I'll go talk to them. The greenette spent a few moments watching his teacher make his way to the gate before the boy turned and made his way up the stairs. Hopefully they'll be gone by the time school finishes. Decent work on yesterday's combat training exercises, you guys. Aizawa told the class as he shuffled through some papers in his hand. I watched the video feeds and went over each of your team's results. Bakugo. The scruffy pro's eyes flitted over to where the explosive blonde Saturday, you're talented. So don't sulk like a child about your loss. Yeah, whatever. The blonde dismissed the comment without much thought. And Midoriya? The teacher continued as if he didn't hear the blonde at all. The greenette tensed up. You did well in the first half. Any good self-defense class will teach you that the most important part of any confrontation is avoiding the fight where possible. But you can't always do that, especially in hero work. I see you still broke your finger to win. Work harder, and don't give me the excuse you don't have control over your strength. That line's already getting old. You can't keep breaking your body while training here. However, if you can get a handle on it, it will be really handy. So show some urgency, alright? Right? The boy said, nodding his head with a smile of pride. Aizawa went on to give quick criticism and advice to everyone about their matches. When he finally finished, the man put his papers down. He spoke up about the next important thing they needed to do. Let's get down to business. Our next task will decide your future. Everyone in the room tensed, worried about what it could be. Another quirk test perhaps? You all need to pick a class representative. And after a sigh of relief, the room descended into chaos of people shouting they should be picked. Midoriya finished the last few equations on the board. Maths today was as easy as it always was for the boy. Though clearly he was in the minority who found it that way. Looking around, he saw the only people other than him who had finished were Ida, Bakugo, and a boy named Todoroki who had half white, half red hair. A girl with black hair that she had up in a ponytail called Yairzu looked like she was just finishing up as well. The decision of who would be class rep had ended up being decided by a vote at Ida's suggestion. Almost everyone had voted for themselves, and the few that didn't. Midoriya shuddered. Somehow he had been picked as the class president. The idea of being responsible for everyone in his class made him shudder. He was barely able to hold a conversation with most of them. The boy sighed as he stole a glance at the clock near the door of the classroom. There was still 20 minutes left of class. Mr. Aizawa will probably be here soon. I should probably go over what I know about dark vision, just in case. And that's what the boy spent the next 5 minutes doing, not that there was really much for him to cover. All he knew was that he could see silhouettes through walls and visualize noise. That was about it. Not really much to go on. A knock sounded on the door to the classroom, drawing everyone's attention before their homeroom teacher walked in and nodded to their maths teacher, Ectoplasm, a pro hero with a cloning quirk and black glass-like skin. Sorry about the interruption, the tired man said in a bored voice. He looked across the class, finding the greenette. Midoriya, come on. The principal is waiting for us at Gym Gamma. The principal has asked you to come along as well, Ecto, by the way. The greenette closed his booklet and tucked in his chair before going to join his teachers at the front. Around him he heard his classmates muttering, wondering why he was being took out the class early. Something which Aizawa once again quirked an eyebrow at. You haven't told them yet? The teacher asked with slight note of surprise. The smaller boy shook his head. I wanted to, but I wasn't sure if you and Principal Nizu would want to talk with me first before I did. The boy explained, which caused even more muttering around him. I understand. Well, come on, best to not keep the principal waiting. The scruffy man said, leading the boy out. The man quickly leant back into the classroom. To quell any potential rumors you might come away with, the reason for this is that your classmate may have developed a new power. The tired pro closed the door, and just a few moments later. What? It was slightly muffled, but Kaken's voice was still plenty loud and definitely not happy. The pro who had casually dropped the news on Midoriya's classmates had a small, creepy smile on his face, prompting the greenette to ask a question he normally wouldn't. Sir? Did you tell them about my new power like that just to make them freak out? He asked, quirking an eyebrow of his own. I have no idea what you could possibly mean by that, the man said, but his smile got wider, making the boy doubt him. Seriously, he's so creepy when he smiles. On the other side of him he heard Ectoplasm groan. Midoriya stared at the newly formed wall of cement before. His literature teacher, Cementos, a hero who had the appearance of a large gray brick with limbs and facial features, had been in the large gym hall with the short mouse bear dog creature that was the principal. Once the boy had explained how his new power worked as far as he was aware, Nizu had explained they wanted the boy to do a quick exercise so they could understand how his power worked. All he had to do was say how many people were there and what he thought they were doing. They'd repeat the exercise a couple times, then the boy could go eat his lunch with his friends. Okay, Midoriya. He heard his maths teacher call from the other side of the wall. Now. The greenette waved his hand, feeling the familiar sensation of his power activating. With a blink, the color of everything changed to the sepia tones and he could see yellow silhouettes past the wall. There's 4 of you. Mr. Aizawa on the far left, the principal on the far right and 2 ectoplasms in between, I think. The principal is waving, the ectoplasms are standing still and Mr. Aizawa is holding up 3 fingers. I wanted to see how much you could discern, even if you can't make out exact details. The man explained from behind the wall. The boy's power dissipated then. I think I just hit the time limit. The boy told them as he rubbed his eyes slightly. Rest your eyes a moment before we continue, Mr. Midoriya. He heard the principal call out. And so that's what Midoriya spent the next 15 minutes doing. Cementos would create cement furniture behind the walls and ectoplasm would create a different number of clones each time. They'd act out different scenarios and the boy had to tell them what was happening as best he could. One had included a surprise assassination of Aizawa that had really caught the greenette off guard. He had barely called out about it in time. Still he had managed and Aizawa had stopped the clone from killing him. All right, Mr. Midoriya. The principal's voice spoke from behind the wall. There will be 2 more, then we'll let you go eat your lunch. For this next one, I am curious as to what will happen if you focus on the idea of Eraserhead being more important than anyone else past this wall. Tell us if doing so causes any changes. And begin. As the boy activated his dark vision, he focused intently on his mental image of Aizawa, and gasped as the silhouettes appeared once more. Among the normal yellow ones was a green one that matched with the shape of Aizawa's previous silhouettes. It was the same lineup as the first time they did this, so it wasn't hard to tell what was happening. You're all doing the same thing as the first time we did this, but Mr. Aizawa is green now. The boy explained. He then decided to try something. The power first activated when I really wanted to see through walls, so I'm going to try to turn it off myself instead of waiting on the time limit running out. Is that okay? Try it. He heard his homeroom teacher tell him, and so he did. He focused on a desire for his vision to return to normal as he repeated the motion he started the power with, and when he blinked again, it worked. The boy called out before taking a seat on the ground. There's just one more you wanted me to do? To his surprise, Aizawa and Nizu rounded around the corner, joining him before the wall fell down, revealing at least 20 different ectoplasms. All right, Midoriya? Aizawa spoke up. Just one last test before you go. Now we know you can mark people as important with that power of yours. Try to see if you can identify the real ectoplasm, right? Midoriya nodded, walking towards the group and activating his power one last time. Show me the real ectoplasm. The greenette watched as the crowd became a massive yellow blob, but among it all, there was one green silhouette standing out. The greenette walked up to the pro and placed a hand on his arm. You're the real ectoplasm. You're green, the rest are just yellow. The clones all dissipated, leaving only the one he had identified. The pro hero beside him looked down with his constant creepy smile as the boy. Nicely done, kid. Yes, that was quite impressive, Mr. Midoriya. The principal praised him happily. Now, just before we let you go running off to meet your friends, do you have any idea for a name for this power? Midoriya smiled, meeting the principal's eye. Dark vision. I want to call it dark vision. Midoriya hated how his body shook and teeth chattered as he looked out among his classmates, being made to hold a meeting as class president. Lunch had been a disaster. He had spent most of it freaking out over the fact he was picked as class rep, and then the alarms had gone off. Somehow, the media had managed to break past the school's defenses, but no one had known it was just some reports looking for a story. Everyone had freaked out, thinking some sort of emergency was going on. In the midst of the chaos, the boy had kept accidentally activating dark vision, and now his head hurt like hell. He had really wanted to know where Ida and Uraraka were as they'd been swept away by the crowd, and his power had reacted to his desire. The amount of yellow that had filled his vision was enough to make him sick of the color. Fortunately, Ida, in a moment of brilliance, had realized it was reporters outside and pulled a stunt to get everyone's attention, calming them all down. He had been so calm and collected and took charge of the situation like he was born to do it. Midoriya took a steadying breath. Hopefully Aizawa wouldn't mind what he was about to do. It's time, class rep, let's begin. Yaozu said from behind him, drawing him into the meeting. She had gotten one less vote than him, making her the vice president. Okay, so we need to figure out who the other class officers will be. Midoriya told the class, hating how pathetic his voice sounded. He shook his head and took a breath. Get yourself together for 2 minutes. But first, there's something that I want to say. Looking up, he saw the entire class's attention was on him. That did not help make this any easier. I thought a lot about this, and I think that Tenya Ida should be our class rep. He heard the boy perk up in surprise when he was mentioned. When the panic was going on during the media break-in, he was able to capture everyone's attention and get us in line. Meanwhile, all I was doing was dealing with my own powers, trying to fry my eyes out. He didn't really think about how the class would react to that, considering he had yet to actually explain his new power. There were shouts of surprise and concern, causing the boy to flinch. So I believe he should be the one leading our class from now on, the boy said as he smiled towards the blue-haired teen. Yeah, you know what? If Midoriya vouches for him, I'm good. Kirishima spoke up. Plus he was a big help. He totally manned up and took charge, right? This is a waste of time. Aizawa spoke up, clearly not amused by what was happening. I don't care who the rep is, just hurry up. And Midoriya, once you had best explain your new power to the class. I'm not doing that for you, right? The greenette nodded, shaking slightly. Mr. Aizawa was scary when he was annoyed. Well, more scary. A slight scraping was heard as Ida stood up from his chair. If Midoriya is nominating me for the job, then I gladly accept. I pledge to carry out my duties to the best of my abilities. Ida told everyone passionately, a slight smile on his face. Great to hear, Ida. Kirishima said with a thumbs up directed at the boy. Midoriya failed to notice the discontented look on the girl beside him. However, he did hear her cough to get his attention. While you're up here, Midoriya, do you mind explaining this new power of yours? It sounds dangerous from what you said a minute ago, right? So this requires some explanation. The boy started, taking a breath. I've already told some of you this, but my quirk, it didn't manifest when I was 5 like most people's. Muttering broke out across the class until Aizawa hushed them all and told them to let the boy finish. Looking across the class, he saw Ida and Uraraka giving him looks of encouragement. And I call my tentacle Far Reach, but my actual quirk is called Mark. Truth is, until recently I was considered quirkless. Gasps were heard, everyone looked at him wide-eyed. Midoriya showed the class his mark. Then, 11 months ago I was attacked by a villain. I was saved by a pro, and at some point during the day, this appeared on my hand. Hang on, so you've only had powers for 11 months? Ashido asked, shocked. But you used them like they were natural to you in the exercise? No, I haven't had them for 11 months actually, the boy explained, putting his hand down. He noticed off to the side Aizawa had suddenly been a lot more interested in what he was saying. Might as well just be honest, well, as honest as I can. Quirkless people aren't treated nicely in the school I came from. At the time I got it, I thought the villain had marked me for some reason because it's not like my mom or dad's quirks. I'll admit, I was pretty worried I'd be treated even worse if people thought it was something like that, so I went with a story that it was a tattoo someone with a quirk had put on me by accident. Wait, so then when did you realize it was a quirk? Hagakure, a girl with an invisibility quirk, asked. If you thought it was just a mark? My powers, when they first unlock, it's related to my desire at the time. The first time I ever used powers, he took a deep breath, they would definitely be more shouts of shock at this. It was during the entrance exam. Just like the boy expected, everyone started shouting shock. Probably Jairu, the girl he tied within the quirk test who had earphone jacks dangling off her ears, was the loudest. You signed up to the exam thinking you were quirkless. How the heck did you pass? Midoriya took a couple minutes to explain his meeting with Uriken and what had happened when the zero-pointer showed up. It was a bit of a ramble, but Aizawa didn't stop him, letting him get his thoughts out. When he finished, light clapping could be heard from Kirishima. Dang it, Midoriya, you were cool enough in the exercise. Now this? We get it, you're super manly, Kirishima said, but he had a smile on his face despite his words. So what's your new power then? Sounds kinda dangerous with how you described it. Oh. The greenette looked up, smiled and activated it. It's not really, I mean I can get a sore eyes and headache from it if I overuse it, but it's actually pretty cool. As far as I know you guys won't see any physical signs of it happening, but I'm doing it right now. It's called dark vision. You guys are all yellow silhouettes right now to me, silhouettes that I can see even through walls. He heard mutterings from some people sounding like they were wishing they had a power like that. Looking around, the boy found out that, to his surprise, the power even worked on Hagakure. He could see her hands and head. I can't see exact details, just kinda the general shapes. I can think of someone as important and they'll be a different color from the rest. I'm not quite sure how it works yet, but it's counteracting Hagakure's invisibility. Wait, really? The girl perked up in surprise. Some around the class looked doubtful. Guess we can see how good that power of yours is. What's my hair like? Similar to Jiru's but longer, just above shoulder length. Everyone held their breath as they waited for the girl to tell them whether Midoriya was right or wrong. The girl let out a small excited squeal. He's right. Finally someone can see me, the girl happily said, dancing in her seat. The class all started talking amongst themselves in surprise. Midoriya decided to wrap up with probably the last question they were wondering. Dark vision activated for the first time in the middle of the exercise. I wanted to see Kaken through the walls cause the area I choose to hide in, the acoustics made it next to impossible to know how close he was. That's pretty much everything. He finished his explanation, but before he could return to his seat, Aizawa stopped him. Nizu explained to me there might be one more thing, but we can't be certain on it. All of you should know in case it happens in the middle of class. Aizawa started. The greenette stopped in his tracks, realizing what he had forgot to mention. Oh, well, there's a possibility I might develop another power or 3, or really even more, not sure yet. The boy said nervously, scratching the back of his head. What? Came the shocked and probably pissed off scream of Bakugo. The classroom descended into shouting chaos for what felt like the 100th time.